Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is the next part of Ben with Gwen. A story about how Ben and Gwen's relationship evolves over the next 4 years following their summer trip. So let's start without any delay. Let's start this great series. March, year 2. Well, you're pretty bad at this one, aren't you? Ben laughed at Gwen as they put their controllers down. It was his 4th victory in a row. Hey, you got it a few days before I did, so you've had more practice. I just need to get warmed up. I'll be kicking your butt like always in no time, Gwen replied. Ben chuckled at that. What do you mean like always? I'll be kicking your butt, like, at least 60% of the time, like always, Gwen revised. Yeah, right, Ben smirked. He took out his phone and checked the time. Gwen thought it was strange how he was always wearing a watch, but he had to use his phone to check the time. I should probably get going soon, he said. Or, come on. You can stay a bit longer, Gwen begged. But your parents are gonna be home soon, aren't they? Ben pointed out. Yeah, but they don't mind if you're here. My mom will probably say I should have asked them first, but I won't get in any real trouble, Gwen explained. I know, but, like, your dad saw me over here yesterday, remember? Ben reminded her. He still felt the need to keep his friendship with Gwen a secret. It was hard enough hiding it from their parents back when he was in denial about it himself, but now that they've made it official, he felt even more awkward about the whole thing. Gwen grunted grudgingly in agreement. Their new relationship wasn't any less strange for her. While she didn't think they were doing anything wrong or weird, she foresaw the embarrassing teasing her father would give her if she were to admit she'd finally changed her mind about Ben after years of claiming he was the worst cousin ever. All right. Pick this up tomorrow, then. She suggested, standing up and walking Ben to the front door. You're on, dweeb, Ben declared. When they got to the door, Gwen opened it for him as he stepped outside. Goodbyes were a little more complicated now that they'd officially declared themselves friends. Gwen usually had the urge to hug him, but she always held back for fear of weirding him out. Ben always wanted to say something more than later, dweeb, but he couldn't come up with anything else most of the time. So, after their usual underwhelming goodbyes, Ben left and Gwen shut the door. Gwen smiled to herself and practically skipped up to her room. It felt good to finally have a friend, a real friend this time, and that feeling was never lost on her. Ben heard something banging against his window. He was in his room trying to study, something he'd been doing more often now that Gwen was regularly helping him with schoolwork. At first, he thought a bird had hit his window, but then it happened again, and again. He stood up and walked over to the window to check it out. Whatever it was appeared to be gone now, but as he turned to walk away, his window shattered. What appeared to be a large yellow battery flew into his room. Whoa! Ben shouted as he ducked out of the way. The battery giggled as it flew over Ben's head and landed on one of his ceiling lights. Ben looked up at the thing. He recognized it as one of the aliens he'd encountered during his first summer, a megawatt, as he called them. Or, come on. One of you guys. Ben watched as the alien broke the light bulb. Little bolts of electricity crackled around it as it bit into the bulb's tungsten filament, feeding on the electricity. Hey! Get down from there! Ben shouted at the alien. In response, the megawatt turned to him and giggled, then flew at him. Ben shrieked as it zapped him. Ah, you little bastards are so annoying, he complained as the alien cackled in delight. At least there's only one of you this time. The Megarot seemed to be able to understand him, because it laughed pretty hard at that before pointing out the window. Confused, Ben looked over. Outside, he saw a swarm of them. They flew through the night sky, landing on power lines and satellite dishes, trying to suck the electricity out of anything they could. "Oh," Ben said. The alien in his room chuckled one last time before flying out the window to rejoin its friends. "Hey, get back here. I'm not done with you yet," he shouted after it. Ben held up his Omnitrix arm. He was about to transform into something to fight them, but he remembered Gwen. He was going to want her help with this. So instead, he changed into XLR8 and ran to her house. Gwen's night began very similarly. She was up in her room studying, when all of a sudden, something came crashing through her window. However, it wasn't an alien that came through her window. It was a rock. Gwen shrieked in surprise, then immediately knew what was going on. "God damn it, Ben!" she shouted. "Sorry," came XLR8's raspy reply. "Why do I even have this window?" Gwen shouted again, walking over to her recently broken window. She opened it fully and looked outside. "What's going on?" Gwen asked, knowing there was heroing to do. "Gee, I don't know. Maybe that." XLR8 gestured upwards and pointed behind him. Gwen followed his gesturing. The swarm of Megarots hadn't hit Gwen's side of town as much yet, but there were still plenty of them flying around. "Whoa," Gwen said. "Okay, I'll get my lucky girl stuff." Moments later, Gwen was suited up and on the ground. There, she hopped into XLR8's arms, and they sped off towards the center of the swarm. Gwen wrapped her arms around XLR8's neck to hold on. Super speed sickness didn't seem to bother her so much when was close to Ben like this, even if he was a weird blue alien at the moment. Arriving in the middle of town where the most Megarots were flying overhead, XLR8 set Lucky Girl down just as the Omnitrix timed out and he reverted back to Ben. Looking around, they saw people fleeing in every direction. The prankster aliens didn't seem to be doing much harm directly, but most people on Earth still panicked at the sight of aliens, even if their existence was common knowledge at this point. "What do we do?" Ben asked. "We don't have a giant rubber band ball this time." Gwen chuckled at that, remembering what happened the first time they'd run into these things. She tried to think of some useful spells. "I think I know a stun spell or two that should work well on electricity-based aliens." "Are any of your aliens good at dealing with electricity?" "No," Ben said. "Oh, wait." He turned the dial on the Omnitrix, flipping through the aliens until he got to the one he was looking for. "I totally forgot about feedback." He slammed his hand down on the watch and transformed. "Oh, I remember that thing," Gwen said, recognizing Ben's new form as one of the aliens they'd fought with last summer. Ben hadn't gotten a chance to use it yet, but now seemed like the perfect time to try it out. "I didn't know you added it to the watch." "Yep. Now check this out." He held up his hand, which had 4 slender fingers with what looked like electrical plugs on the ends of them. Streaks of electricity extended from a group of nearby Megarots, like feedback's fingers were sucking the energy right out of them. After a moment, the aliens fell to the ground, apparently unconscious. "Awesome. I knew that would work." Feedback shouted. "Well, I thought that probably would work." "That's 4 for me," he declared, turning to Lucky Girl. Gwen smirked. She held up her hand and aimed it at a swarm of Megarots. She spoke her spell, and a ball of light surged forth. The megarots she hit fell to the ground as well. 5, 6, 7 for me, she counted. They looked into each other's eyes, or in Feedback's case, for a moment. Without another word, they smiled and nodded, and the competition was on. 44, 45, 46 Feedback counted off, picking megarots out of the air one by one. Ha! You're going down, lucky girl. 62, 63. Lucky girl shot off some stun spells, knocking out a few stragglers. Then she saw a bigger group of the aliens, and shot a large ball of energy at them, knocking them all out of the air at once. I'm sorry, you were saying? She said, turning to Feedback with a smug smile on her face. No fair. He complained. Those ones were too close together. That only counts as one. Fat chance, Gimli. I've so got this, lucky girl declared. Suddenly, the remaining megarots started making a lot of noise. Ben and Gwen looked up at the sky. The aliens were flying away, looking annoyed at the two of them for spoiling their fun. Hey, wait! Feedback called after them. Get back here. You can't leave now, she's gonna win. The Omnitrix started blinking, and a moment later he was Ben again. Oh, man. Ben let his arms fall to his sides, defeated. Yes. I win again. Gwen said, striking a victory pose next to Ben. What do you mean again? Ben asked. I always win, Gwen said with a smirk. Usually. Ben crossed his arms, but said nothing. They looked around. There were plenty of wrecked power lines, street lamps, neon signs, and all kinds of electronics everywhere, not to mention dozens of unconscious battery aliens. What are we gonna do with them all? Ben asked. Gwen thought for a second. I guess wrap them up in something insulating, then take them to Grandpa. Gwen suggested. Maybe he has some plumber way of dealing with them. Ben agreed to the idea, and the two of them set off collecting all the little aliens they'd knocked out of the sky. Max was surprised when his grandkids showed up at his mobile home in the middle of the night carrying huge, bundled-up tarps filled with swarms of unconscious Nosedenians, but he'd seen plenty of stranger things in his time. So, he invited them inside, and together they stashed the aliens in one of the Rust Bucket's secret compartments for the time being. Would you like some hot chocolate, kids? Max offered. Ben and Gwen said at the same time. They gave each other a look. Knowing Max's cooking, they figured he would give them mud and call it nature's chocolate or something. Both of them tried to think of an excuse to say no. Max laughed. Don't worry, it's store-bought. The three of them sat down together at the Rust Bucket's table, and Ben and Gwen told Max all about the alien swarm. Oh man, you should have seen them, Grandpa. I must have taken down hundreds of them. Gwen chuckled quietly at Ben's exaggeration. Then he surprised her when he said, and Gwen took down even more than I did. Gwen smiled and even blushed a little. It wasn't often that Ben complimented her like that, let alone admitted she'd beat him at something. Yeah, well, you probably just haven't gotten the hang of Feedback yet. Once you try him out a bit more, I'm sure you'll be able to take down a swarm twice that big by yourself, Gwen said, returning Ben's praise. Max smiled warmly at the two of them. Sounds like it was quite the alien invasion. I'm glad you two were there to stop it. And I must say, it's nice to see you two finally getting along. Ben and Gwen both averted their gaze in embarrassment. Maybe they'd slipped up by being that nice to each other in front of him. They also became aware of how they were sitting. They were right next to each other at the table. Gwen was leaning into Ben's side, like she was ready to use him as a pillow. Ben's arm wasn't around her, but it was behind her on the backrest, so it looked almost like it was. They quickly adjusted their position and scooted away from each other a bit. "You two are getting along, aren't you?" Max asked, slightly confused, but not surprised, by their reaction. Ben and Gwen shared a look. They didn't say anything, but they could tell what the other was thinking. Gwen gave Ben a questioning, hesitant grimace, and he responded with a light nod. "If there's anyone we can tell, it's Grandpa." "Ah, yeah." Gwen spoke uncertainly. "We're kinda, sort of friends now, I guess." Gwen could tell Max was very happy to hear that. "Not that he's any less of a doofus now, though," she clarified. Ben laughed. "Right back, Asher, dweeb," he said, putting her in a headlock and roughly to sling her hair. "Ow. Ben. Stop." Gwen struggled, but she was laughing as she did. After Gwen broke out of Ben's headlock, she elbowed him in the side. "Ow. Okay, geez," Ben said, still smiling. Afterwards, his face got a little more serious as he turned his attention back to his grandfather. "And, Grandpa. Could you, maybe, not tell our parents? About the whole friend thing, I mean." Max furrowed his brow. "Why not? I can say for a fact they'll all be delighted to hear it." "Grandpa, please." Gwen lightly pleaded as well. "We know this is what they wanted, and, well, that's kinda what we're afraid of." Max paused, then laughed heartily. "Oh, you kids. You can't let the adults be right about anything, can you?" Ben and Gwen looked a little ashamed, but they kept looking at him pleadingly. Max shook his head good-naturedly, deciding he would never understand these kids. All right. Your secret's safe with me." "Thanks, Grandpa," Ben and Gwen said in unison. April, year 2. One day, Ben and Gwen were hanging out at the mall together. The mall had become one of their more frequent hangouts, despite the fact that neither of them had enough money to actually buy anything every time they went there. Still, it was a fun place to kill time, grab a bite to eat, and maybe look at some things they might want to buy once they had enough money saved up from their allowance. On this particular trip, they had just eaten lunch and had gotten into a discussion of Grandpa's worst meals. No, the absolute worst has got to be his eel pie. Remember that? It had whole eel heads sticking out of it, staring at you while you ate it," Gwen said. The two of them cracked up at the memory. It had been disgusting, but having gone through it together, they were able to laugh about it now. Oh, what about that one time he made spaghetti that had actual live worms in it for some reason? And you wrapped some up on your fork, and you realized it was moving, so you screamed and threw your fork at me," Ben said. That event had actually caused a big fight between the two of them at the time, but now Ben was telling the story with a priceless smile on his face. Gwen laughed along with him as he told the story, but she stopped all of a sudden. Ben saw she was looking down over the railing at something on the lower level. He followed her gaze, and knew immediately what had killed her mood. Nicole and those other two girls were there. "Oh, great. Her again," Ben said sarcastically, hoping Gwen wouldn't worry too much about her bully. Gwen said nothing and just kept staring with a blank look on her face. She hadn't spoken about those girls at all after their run-in with them before, but Ben could tell she was used to the obnoxious one making her feel bad about herself in one way or another. He didn't like that. He wanted to do something about it. Hey, what do you say we mess with her a bit? Ben suggested. Gwen turned to him. She saw the mischievous smirk on his face, which actually made her feel a bit better just by looking at it. She smiled back at him. What do you have in mind? Some kind of prank? Oh, totally. I got a few things in mind. And we're gonna need some of your magic. For the next hour, Ben and Gwen followed Nicole and her friends around the mall, staying out of sight. Whenever they could, Ben would come up with small ways to inconvenience her, and Gwen would fire off a jinx to make it happen. As far as Nicole could tell, she was having the worst luck ever, all day. When she tried to get some soda from a dispenser in the food court, it sprayed her with cola. All the clothes she tried on would suddenly become really itchy or they'd magically tighten. She tripped several times, always dropping things when she did. Her friends kept laughing at her whenever they witnessed these incidents, which seemed to bother Nicole to no end. Gwen was loving it. Every time Ben whispered a suggestion in her ear, she'd laugh, cast her spell, and then watch the ensuing chaos from their hiding spot. She and Ben would lose it every time they heard Nicole complain. Hiding behind a pillar, Ben's laughter died down. Okay, what should we do next? He asked Gwen. Gwen hesitated. Actually, I think that's enough. What? Why? I've gotten back at her now. It was fun, but at a certain point, I think we're just being jerks. All right, fine, Ben relented. Guess we still gotta be heroes and all that. However, as they were discussing this, they didn't notice Nicole and her friends walking in their direction. So when they rounded the corner to leave, they nearly collided with them. Ben and Gwen were startled, but Nicole immediately put on a predatory grin. Oh, hey. Gwen's back. Oh, Lord. Her tall friend face-palmed. Hello, Nicole. Gwen spoke, her voice clearly betraying how much she didn't want to talk to this girl again. This is perfect timing. Me and the girls were just about to go pick out some makeup. You wanna come with? I'm sure we could find something that won't get all runny when you cry, Nicole said with obviously fake friendliness. Great idea. Ben said, drawing the girls' attention to him. While you're at it, you can find some makeup that won't run when you get sprayed by the Coke dispenser. Ben gave her a smug smile as he let her know they'd seen her embarrassing episode earlier in the food court. Gwen laughed at that, and Nicole's friends joined in. Nicole's confidence faltered. Something like that wouldn't have been too bad for most people, but to a 12-year-old girl who cared way too much about her appearance, it was absolutely humiliating. She dropped her fake smile and glared at Ben. Well, Gwen, I see your boyfriend has about as much class as you do. No way, Ben said. Gwen's way classier than me. With that, he flipped Nicole off, then grabbed Gwen's hand and walked away with her. Nicole and her friends stared in disbelief. Nicole wasn't used to be disrespected like that. Gwen stared too as Ben led her away, but she was staring at Ben's other hand. The one holding hers. Well, that was fun. What do you wanna do now? Ben asked after they had walked past a few stores. Gwen tried to formulate words, but she was still too focused on holding Ben's hand. Home. Ben stopped and turned to look at Gwen. Realizing what was distracting her, he quickly pulled his hand away from hers. Sorry. He said, immediately embarrassed. It's fine. Gwen said, a little too loudly and a little too quickly. Then she cleared her throat, trying to hide her own embarrassment. Thanks for that back there. And for today, she said. Ben smiled. No sweat. We'll say we're even now for that time you beat up Cash for me at the arcade, Ben joked. Gwen chuckled. Oh yeah. That was fun too. They gave each other a significant look, and they were both thinking the same thing. Whether it's aliens, bad guys, or just plain bullies, no one messes with my cousin. Except me. May, year 2. Gwen was a little nervous when her parents told her they needed to talk with her about something important. At first she thought she was in trouble, but her father assured her it was nothing like that. Then she got even more nervous. Maybe they wanted to give her the talk. Gwen inwardly cringed at the thought. She was not looking forward to whenever they decided to spring that awkward conversation on her. But luckily, that wasn't the case either. Gwen and her parents gathered in their living room. She sat on the sofa, and they sat in chairs across from her. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Gwen asked. Her father cleared his throat. Well, it's about my cousin Joel. Gwen blinked. Joel was part of her secret alien-related double life, which her parents knew nothing about. She had to be careful what she told them. Oh. What about him? She asked, keeping a straight face. Did they find out he's a plumber? Frank spoke calmly. He and his wife both need to go away on business for a while. They said they would really rather not, but they're having financial difficulties, Natalie explained. What? Are they okay? Gwen asked, suddenly very concerned. They're fine, her father assured her. But it was a mistake for a young, newly married couple to adopt a 10-year-old child right away, her mother put bluntly. So this is about Lucy? Gwen asked. It isn't her fault, Frank said. However, the issue now is that Joel and Camille cannot take Lucy with them while they are traveling on business. So, we've offered to let Lucy stay here with us for a couple of months. Here? Months? This was rather sudden, so Gwen was having trouble processing how she felt about that. Your Uncle Carl offered to take her in for half the time, but I think it would be easier on Lucy if she didn't have to move around too much, Frank continued. So, what we're asking you, Gwen, is if this arrangement would be all right with you. Gwen's mother nodded in agreement, although the look on her face made Gwen think her mother wasn't entirely okay with the idea. Gwen thought for a moment. Lucy could be kind of annoying in an overly energetic kind of way, and sometimes she helped Ben play pranks on her. But she wasn't all bad. She was a lot of fun to hang out with, and she seemed like a genuinely nice person. Plus, she was family. Yeah, Gwen said, giving her parents a nod. That would be all right with me. Great. Gwen's father said. I'll let Joel know. And don't worry, she'll be staying in the guest room, so you'll still have your room all to yourself. Gwen nodded again. Her parents got up and left the room. After taking another moment to process the news, the first thing she decided to do was go up to her room and call Ben. She felt like she needed to tell him about what was going on. Up in her room, she pulled out her phone. Ben was the first name in her contact list, which was not that surprising given how short a list it was. She called him, and after a few rings, he answered. Hey, dweeb, came his usual greeting. Hey, doofus, Gwen responded without a second thought. So, I just had kind of a weird conversation with my parents. About Lucy? Ben asked. Yeah. How do you know? My parents told me about it too. So did you say yes? What? Well, yeah. I said she could stay at my house. Don. What do you mean, Don? I wanted her to stay at my house. Lucy's awesome. Gwen chuckled and rolled her eyes. Ben and Lucy got along really well, although Gwen thought Lucy seemed a little too into Ben sometimes. So, anyway, what do you think is up with Joel and Camille? Gwen asked. I haven't heard anything about this until just now. I doubt they're really having money problems. That's gotta be their cover. They are probably going off to fight the rest of the evil, shape-shifting mud aliens who want to destroy the Earth, Ben said. He spoke as if he thought that explanation sounded awesome. Gwen was unsure. She doubted Joel and Camille's wedding had been the end of the Plummer/Len open feud, but she didn't think they would be interested in that conflict anymore. Why don't we just ask Lucy when she gets here? Ben suggested. No, don't do that, Gwen warned. Look, Lucy's probably having a pretty difficult time with her family. Whatever's going on, we should try not to pry. All right. But let me know as soon as she gets there, and the three of us can hang out. Okay. Later, doofus. Later, dweeb. On the day Lucy was supposed to arrive, Gwen went upstairs as soon as she got home from school. However, while she hadn't seen Lucy anywhere in the house, she was surprised to find her grandfather instead. For some reason, he was in her room, sitting at her desk. Grandpa? Gwen asked, confused. Gwen, I have something very important to tell you, Max said in a gravely serious voice. What is it, Grandpa? Gwen was worried. To her, a surprise visit from her grandfather about something important most likely meant they were in danger from some bad guys or aliens. Max stood up and stared at Gwen with a grim expression on his face. Then, he suddenly smiled. Psych. He said, but it wasn't his voice. It was the voice of a young girl. With that same little girl voice, he started giggling wildly, snorting as he did. In the second it took Gwen to process the situation, she was utterly confused. Then it became very clear to her. Lucy! Gwen said in a scolding voice. Lucy morphed down into her standard human shape, a smiling blonde girl in a red skirt and a blue t-shirt with a white star on it. Gwen! She said cheerily, running at her and throwing herself into a hug. Are you surprised to see me? She asked, still holding Gwen tightly. Not really, Gwen said, lightly pushing Lucy as she stepped back. I was expecting you today. And here I am. Ooh, this is gonna be so great. Lucy said, jumping up and spinning in the air. It's gonna be you and me, living together. 4 months. It's like we're sisters. She proclaimed, grinning at Gwen. Gwen was already overwhelmed by Lucy's energy and enthusiasm. She put her hands on Lucy's shoulders just to keep her in place for a second. Yeah. It's good to see you too, Lucy. You need any help moving your stuff into the guest room? Nope. All taken care of. Lucy said, grabbing Gwen by the hands. She started stepping in a circle around Gwen really quickly, spinning Gwen around as she did. Whoa. Gwen shouted, pulling her hands away and steadying herself. Could you bring it down a couple notches? Okay. Wanna go do something fun? Lucy suggested. Ooh. What do you do for fun around here? Magic. Karate. Dancing. Shopping. Soccer. Well, I was gonna go hang out with Ben in a little bit. You wanna come with? Gwen asked. Awesome. I was looking forward to seeing Ben again, too. Come on, let's go. Lucy gestured for Gwen to follow her and headed out of the room. Wait. You don't know where we're going. Gwen called after her, following Lucy down the hall. Gwen and Lucy walked to the park where Gwen usually met with Ben. Or rather, Gwen walked, while Lucy skipped. On the way, Lucy flung a barrage of questions at Gwen. Since she was used to it from every other time she'd seen Lucy, Gwen patiently answered her questions whenever she stopped talking long enough for her to do so. She didn't mind, but Lucy's curiosity never seemed to be satisfied. When they got to the park, they spotted Ben. Lucy let out an excited squeal before sprinting over to him. She leapt at Ben and threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him off balance. Whoa! Hey, Lucy, Ben said, a little caught off guard. Ben! It's so good to see you! Lucy exclaimed, stepping back and bouncing on her toes. How ya been? Still fightin' bad guys with the Omnitrix? Lucy asked, throwing a few punches at the air to demonstrate. Ben chuckled. You bet I am. Gwen, who had chosen to walk normally, eventually caught up to Lucy. Hey, doofus, she greeted Ben. Sup, dweeb. Ha ha, dweeb. Lucy laughed. Ooh. You wanna hear something funny? Lucy turned to Ben. When Gwen got home today, I shapeshifted into your grandpa, and she totally fell for it. Lucy giggled. Ben joined in with Lucy and laughed. Gwen rolled her eyes. You should have seen the look on your face. Lucy said to Gwen, still giggling and snorting. The three of them only had a couple hours to hang out since Gwen knew her parents would want them back in time for dinner, so they decided to stay in the park and toss a frisbee around. As they did, Lucy asked them about the Nosedenian swarm that had hit Bellwood a couple months ago. Apparently she'd heard about it on the news. Ben was happy to tell the whole story, with Gwen stepping in now and then to correct him whenever he decided to exaggerate. Lucy acted very impressed with them, and especially with Ben. He seemed to be loving the attention. Gwen thought the whole thing was silly, since those aliens weren't even that dangerous. They were more of a nuisance than anything. So how many of them were there? Lucy asked. Oh, well, I lost count after I took down 100 or so, Ben said. I turned into my new alien, feedback, and just sucked the electricity right out of them. And Gwen must have taken down 1,000 with her magic. Gwen smiled. We so didn't take down that many. We barely broke the 100 mark combined. But he's right about one thing, I did take down more of them than he did, she said proudly. Ah, well, yeah, but... Ben fidgeted nervously after having been called out on his exaggeration. Lucy laughed. So what'd you do with them all? Lucy asked. We gave them to our grandfather, Gwen explained. What? Why? What's he want with them? He gonna stick 'em in the world's largest light bulb? Lucy asked. Ben and Gwen shrugged. Ben tossed the frisbee to Lucy, but it went way over her head. Whoops, Ben called out. I got it. Lucy jumped, and her arm extended. It turned into a long tendril of purple mud and snatched the frisbee out of the air. She landed, and her arm retracted, turning back to normal. Woohoo! She celebrated. Wow, awesome! Ben shouted. Lucy! Gwen ran over to her and looked around nervously. You can't do things like that in public. People can't know you're an alien, remember? There were only a few other people in the park, but luckily no one seemed to be paying any attention to them. Lucy giggled. Sorry, Gwen. I kinda forgot. Then she looked at Ben. Dang, guess that probably means you're not allowed to transform either, huh? 'Cause I totally wanna see feedback. I've never seen a conductoid in person before, she said, guessing what type of alien it was by the description of its powers. Ben held up his Omnitrix arm proudly. Heh. Don't worry, I can show you all my moves later. Lucy raised her eyebrows at that. Oh really? Ben realized how that must have sounded and got flustered. No. I didn't mean it like, Lucy cracked up at Ben's embarrassment. As much as Gwen didn't care for innuendo humor, she couldn't help but laugh at the look on Ben's face. Ben hung his head. Lucy walked up behind Ben and put her hands on his shoulders. Don't worry, tough guy, she said with a teasing grin on her face, leaning in to speak into his ear. I'd love to see all your moves. Ben tensed up and was visibly uncomfortable, which only made Lucy giggle more. Gwen stopped laughing, and she was getting a little weirded out. Lucy definitely seemed a little more flirty than Gwen was comfortable with. By which I mean you're aliens, of course. What did you think I meant? Lucy joked. Lucy, knock it off. Ben complained, her teasing starting to get to him. All right, sorry, Lucy relented, still giggling a little. A little while later, it was time for them to leave. Gwen and Lucy said their goodbyes to Ben and headed home. Surprisingly, Lucy walked normally alongside Gwen on the way back instead of skipping or anything. I guess even she gets tired. Lucy went back to asking Gwen a million questions, but this time they all seemed to be about her and Ben instead of about Bellwood or Earth in general. She wasn't sure what was making her so curious about them now, but she brushed it off. She probably just wants to get to know us more. After dinner, Gwen went back to her room and got on her computer. Before long, there was a knock on her door. Yes. Gwen called out in response. The door opened. Hi, Lucy said, poking her head in the door. You busy? No, not really. Come on in. Gwen waved her in. Lucy came into the room and lied down on Gwen's bed. They talked for a while, with Gwen asking about the whole living arrangement and Lucy asking about anything that happened to pop into her mind. Apparently, Lucy wouldn't be going to school with Gwen while she was staying with her. Since there were only a couple months left in the school year, her school was letting her take her courses online while she was away. Lucy had been going to a normal school on Earth while she was living with Camille and Joel, although Camille had been giving her educational material from their home planet as well. She had also brought a full wardrobe with her, despite the fact that she could simply make clothing with her shape-shifting. Gwen asked if it was just for her cover, but it turns out Lucy liked real clothing better. Gwen figured she liked it because it made her feel more like a normal Earth girl, or because it had a sort of alien charm in her eyes. Gwen only asked about stuff like this since she figured it would be a safe topic of conversation. She didn't try to ask about Lucy's adoption, her situation with her real parents, or what was going on with her cousin and Joel, despite the fact that she was very curious about it all. Gwen started doing some homework on her computer while Lucy continued to lie on her bed, swinging her legs up and down while humming softly to herself. After a lull in the conversation, Lucy asked a question. So, are you and Ben Ulthrike? Confused, Gwen rotated in her chair to face her. Lucy had a curious look on her face and was gesturing with her hands, although Gwen wasn't sure what the gestures meant. "He's my best friend," Gwen stated plainly. She figured Lucy would be hanging around her and Ben a lot, so it would have been a hassle to try to hide their friendship from her. Plus, it felt good to say that out loud. She smiled inwardly. Lucy giggled. "Well, duh. You guys have been best friends for as long as I've known you." Gwen furrowed her brow. "She met us at her cousin's wedding. We weren't friends yet back then, were we?" "What I was asking," Lucy continued, "is if you were, anything else." It took Gwen a second to figure out what Lucy was asking. "You mean you, gross," she said, spinning around in her chair to look back at her computer screen. "He's my cousin. And yours too, by the way," she reminded her, trying to go back to doing her homework. "He's not my cousin," Lucy corrected her. "He's my second cousin-in-law, once removed." She giggled. "And he's kinda cute, isn't he?" Gwen tensed up and nearly gagged. "So gross. Don't act like you haven't thought about it." "I haven't." "Oh, come on," Lucy said, walking up behind Gwen and putting her hands on her shoulders. "You really never noticed those gorgeous emerald eyes of his?" "They're no different than mine," Gwen pointed out. "And yours are gorgeous." Lucy covered Gwen's eyes with her hands. "Hey! Knock it off." Gwen shoved Lucy's hands off of her face. She spun her chair around to face Lucy again, but she ended up face to face with Ben instead. Lucy had shapeshifted while her back was turned. "What do you think?" Lucy asked in a perfect imitation of Ben's voice, running her hands through her hair and wiggling her eyebrows. She leaned in real close to Gwen's face. "Come on, you love it," she said with a smirk. "Back up." Gwen stood up, forcefully shoving Lucy with both hands. Lucy stumbled backwards and fell onto Gwen's bed. Gwen was still weirded out, but she immediately panicked after pushing Lucy down like that. "Oh my gosh! Lucy, are you okay?" On her back, Lucy erupted in a fit of laughter. She shapeshifted back into her standard human form and stood up, holding up a peace sign. "I'm good," she said. She laughed again. "Geez, Gwen. You gotta learn to relax a little. I was just playing around. By turning into my cousin and flirting with me?" Gwen asked in bewilderment. Lucy just smiled and shrugged. "No, seriously, Lucy. That is, like, so messed up." Okay, Lucy raised her hands up. "From now on, no more shape-shifting into Ben. I promise," she said. "Unless you ask nicely," she added with a wink. "Lucy!" Gwen shouted. Lucy ran out of the room laughing, and Gwen slammed the door behind her. Gwen sank back into her chair. She felt flustered. She looked down and noticed her hands were shaking. She wasn't too angry with Lucy, but that whole situation had made her very uncomfortable. She can't really think he's cute, right? And she definitely can't expect me to think so too, right? Gwen was hoping Lucy had only done all of that to mess with her, but Lucy was crazy enough that she might have actually been serious. She thought about what Lucy had said. She really didn't want to, but she couldn't get her mind off it that easily. She'd said something about her and Ben's eyes. Their eyes really were scarily similar, Gwen knew that. It was actually something Lucy had pointed out once before, at the family Christmas party. Gwen got up from her chair and stood in front of her mirror, looking into the eyes of her reflection. "I guess my eyes are kinda pretty." Gwen tried not to worry too much about her appearance, but she was able to admit that much to herself. So I guess that means Ben. You know. Gross, Gwen said out loud, stepping away from the mirror. She sat back down, leaned her elbows on her desk, and pressed her face into her hands. Living with Lucy might be tricky. June, Year 2. Lucy quickly became a regular participant in Ben and Gwen's daily hangouts. For the past month, everywhere they went, it was the three of them rather than just the two of them. To Gwen, it felt a little odd. She'd only just gotten used to having one friend, and now she had two. It was strange, but she kind of liked it. Ben definitely enjoyed having Lucy around. She loved to goof off and annoy Gwen almost as much as he did. However, Ben only ever saw Lucy when they were playing around. She was fun then, but he didn't have to live with her. On the other hand, Gwen was facing some challenges she wasn't used to at home. One day, after school, Gwen met up with Ben in the park. They had plans to go over to her house, so they told Lucy they'd just meet her there. It was an opportunity for Gwen to be alone with Ben, which is something she'd come to miss over the last month. She decided now would be a good time to ask Ben something about Lucy since she wasn't around at the moment. "Hey Ben," she asked, walking alongside him on the way to her house. "Yeah." Ben turned his head. "Does Lucy ever, I don't know, get on your nerves a little?" Gwen decided that was probably a polite enough way to ask. "What?" "Nah. Lucy's great," Ben responded. "I didn't say she wasn't. I just mean, like, she can be a little much sometimes, you know. Plus she can be impossible to live with sometimes. Like, she keeps trying to pull these shape-shifting pranks on me, and that got old real fast. And she's always borrowing my clothes without asking. She doesn't even need clothes. And the questions. She never stops with the questions. Like, even when I'm clearly busy with homework or whatever, she'll just barge into my room asking me how they get the fortunes inside fortune cookies. How do they get them in there?" Ben, Gwen said, annoyed. Ben laughed. "Well, that's just what happens when you live with someone for too long, isn't it? I drive you nuts after just one day together in the rust bucket, don't I?" Gwen smiled at that. Then she sighed. "I don't know, maybe." She had other complaints about her new housemate that she didn't feel like mentioning to Ben. Particularly about how Lucy kept trying to have boy talk with her, and about how she usually brought up Ben when she did. Gwen kept telling her that humans found that sort of thing weird, but apparently Lenopans did too, and Lucy just didn't seem to care. When they got to Gwen's house, as they were walking to the front door, they heard a voice call out to them from the driveway. "Hey! Think fast!" "Huh?" Ben turned his head to see a soccer ball flying at his face. Luckily for him, Gwen reflexively caught it out of the air before it hit him. "Whoa!" Ben reeled back in surprise. From across the front lawn, Lucy giggled and snorted at Ben's reaction. "The look on your face. Priceless." "Thanks for the save," Ben thanked Gwen. "Don't mention it." Gwen smirked at Lucy. "Think fast." She tossed the ball into the air. On its way down, Gwen spun and kicked it at Lucy. "Ha!" Lucy snapped out of her giggling fit just before the ball hit her. When it did, she turned into mud and splattered onto the driveway. "Ooh!" Ben and Gwen both winced. Gwen grimaced. "Too hard." "Too hard," Ben confirmed. But in seconds, Lucy reformed and hopped into the air. "Dang, Gwen. Nice kick." After glancing around to locate the ball, she ran to retrieve it and kicked it back towards Gwen. The three of them ended up playing soccer in Gwen's front yard for a while. They didn't have a net, but they enjoyed kicking it at each other and playing keep away. Gwen and Lucy even teamed up once Ben started trying to show off. They also found some bowling pins in Gwen's garage and took turns setting them up and kicking the soccer ball at them. But eventually, it started to rain, so they had to head inside. Gwen's parents were both going to be out late, so her father had told her and Lucy they could order pizza for dinner. Gwen made the call to place the order while Ben and Lucy got cleaned up. The two of them had continued playing for a bit in the rain after Gwen had gone inside to order the food, so they were a little muddy. After her order was placed, Gwen went back to her room. Her hair was kind of a mess after playing outside, so she wanted to brush it a little. However, when she looked on top of her dresser where she kept her hairbrush, it wasn't there. Gwen sighed exasperatedly. Lucy had already borrowed her hairbrush without asking several times since she'd started living with her, so she figured Lucy must have taken it again. She left her room to go look for her. As she walked down the hall, she heard the faucet running in the bathroom. The door was open, and inside she saw Ben washing something in the sink. "Have you seen Lucy?" Gwen asked, standing in the doorway. "Nope," Ben said, looking up at her. "Lucy keeps using my hairbrush without asking. And she keeps getting mud on it," Gwen complained. "Yeah, some people can be so inconsiderate," Ben said, chuckling nervously. "I know, right? Plus Gwen looked down and noticed Ben was barefoot. She gave him a quizzical look. He grinned, but he looked guilty. Then she looked in the sink. Ben was cleaning mud off of his shoes, and he was using her hairbrush to do it." Gwen clenched her teeth and glared at him, groaning in anger. Ben dropped the hairbrush and darted past her before she could stop him. "Sorry," he shouted as he ran down the hall. Gwen grabbed her hairbrush and chased after him. As this commotion was going on, Lucy was wandering around in search of Ben and Gwen, casually leafing through one of Gwen's books as she roamed the house. Rounding the corner, she stepped right in Ben's path. "Gangway!" Ben shouted. Lucy looked up from the book and jumped out of the way just before Ben collided with her. A second later, Gwen ran past, holding a hairbrush as she chased after him. "This hairbrush is going up your nose," she shouted. Lucy had no idea what was going on, but the sight made her crack up. "Wait up!" she called, dropping her book and chasing after them. "I wanna play too." Gwen caught up to Ben in the living room. She lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. Ben rolled over onto his back, and Gwen pinned him down. She took her muddy hairbrush and started rubbing it on his face. "Ow! Hey, come on!" "Ow!" Ben struggled. "How do you like getting mud on your things?" Gwen shouted at him. The two of them could hear Lucy laughing before she suddenly piled on top of them. In an instant, they were all wrestling with each other, fighting for control of the hairbrush. After a brief struggle, Lucy stood and held up the hairbrush like a trophy. "Huzzah! Yes! I win!" she shouted. Ben and Gwen, who were both still down on the floor, sat up and looked at her. They were both covered in mud, and Gwen's hair was even more of a mess than before. "That was fun," Lucy said, looking down at the two of them. "What were we doing?" she asked. Ben and Gwen panted, out of breath from the exercise. Ben started laughing. Lucy joined in, and so did Gwen. Gwen was a little embarrassed for herself. That was the most childish thing she'd done in a while. Maybe Lucy's rubbing off on me. But for some reason, she felt sort of relieved. Gwen stood up and took her hairbrush back from Lucy. "I need this," she said, walking back to the bathroom. "Okie dokie," Lucy said, also walking away to pick up the book she'd dropped earlier. Ben decided to follow Gwen. He found her at the bathroom sink, cleaning her hairbrush. He leaned in the doorway like she'd done earlier. "Sorry for taking your hairbrush," he apologized. Gwen sighed. "It's fine. I just feel bad about blaming Lucy for something you did." She thought of what Ben had said earlier when she was complaining about living with Lucy. He'd said she was only getting on her nerves because they were living together, and that he bothered her just as much when they spent the summer together in the rust bucket. "She really is just as annoying as you," Gwen said to Ben. Ben laughed. "I take offense to that." He walked up behind her and smacked her on the back. "I am much better at annoying you than Lucy is." Then he turned and walked out of the room. Gwen smiled. "I guess even if she's annoying sometimes, Lucy isn't that bad. Ben annoys the heck out of me, and I put up with him, don't I?" Ben and Gwen sat across from each other sipping smoothies. They'd met up at Mr. Smoothie after Gwen's karate practice, like they did most Thursdays. Recently, Lucy had been coming along too, but today she was too busy studying for her online courses. "Hey Gwen," Ben said, getting her attention. "What?" Gwen asked. "How long is Lucy staying with you, exactly?" Ben asked. Gwen thought about it, and realized she didn't actually know. Her father had said she'd be staying with them for a couple months, and that was nearly 2 months ago. He didn't give an exact date, and as far as she knew, they hadn't received any updates on Joel and Camille's situation. "I don't actually know. My parents haven't told me anything, and Lucy hasn't said anything either," Gwen said. "Why?" "Well, I was just thinking, school's almost out. And we're going on our next summer trip soon," Ben explained. Gwen hadn't thought of that. She'd expected Lucy to be gone by the time they left for their summer trip. "If she's still gonna be here for the summer, why not ask her to come with us?" Ben asked. Gwen didn't respond right away. She didn't want to say anything, but the idea kind of disappointed her. The summer trips had sort of become their thing, and she'd been really looking forward to spending some time with Ben, just the two of them. But she reminded herself that Lucy was in a bit of a bad spot. Besides, it wasn't like they could just leave her alone with her parents all summer. "I guess summer is never really just me and Ben anyway. Grandpa is always there too." Even though she knew that was different, it was enough of a rationalization for her. "Yeah, I guess we should, shouldn't we?" was Gwen's rather unenthusiastic answer. Later, as they were walking home, Gwen called her father and asked him if Lucy could join her and Ben on their summer trip with Maximum. He said it would be fine with him as long as it was okay with their grandfather. He didn't mention anything about how much longer Lucy was expected to be staying with them, which she found a little odd. It seemed like he still hadn't heard anything from Joel and Camille. Afterwards, Ben and Gwen called their grandfather and got the okay for Lucy to come with them. "The more, the merrier," was all Max had to say about it. With everyone's permission, the only thing left to do was invite Lucy. Back at Gwen's house, Gwen and Ben approached the guest room door. Gwen was hesitant to knock. She didn't want to interrupt her if she was still studying. Ben didn't really care about that, so he stepped forward and knocked on the door instead. "Lucy." he asked. The door opened in what felt like less than a second. Hey, guys. What's going on? Lucy asked, beaming at them. Hey, Lucy, Gwen spoke. We wanted to ask you something. You know how me and Gwen go on a road trip with our grandpa over the summer? Ben asked. Gwen and I, Gwen corrected. Shut up. Lucy nodded. Ben and Gwen had told her a lot about their summer trips. They'd met her on their first one, after all. They always enjoyed talking about it, and Lucy thought it sounded like a ton of fun. Well, we figured, as long as you're here, Gwen began. You should come with us. Ben said, finishing Gwen's sentence. Lucy gasped and smiled brightly. Wow. Really? You mean it? She asked. Sure. You in? Ben asked. Lucy shrieked with glee, clapping her hands quickly. Yes. Yes. Of course. She lunged at them, pulling them both into a tight hug. This is gonna be so much fun. Where are we gonna go? What cities are we gonna visit? What landmarks are we gonna see? Ooh. Do I get to help fight bad guys and save the world, too? For what little remained of the school year, Lucy was very excited about the trip. The first day of summer. So where are we going first? Lucy asked as she and Gwen carried the last of their stuff into the rust bucket. I don't know, ask my grandpa, Gwen answered. What kinda aliens are we gonna see? Lucy asked. Pshaw. Gwen spun around and shushed her. She nodded towards her house, where her parents were standing by the front door talking to Maximum. We gotta keep quiet about that stuff while my parents are here. Lucy smiled and nodded, doing that lip-zipping gesture to say she'll be quiet. That lasted about 2 seconds. So when does Ben get here? We're stopping by Doofus' house next, Gwen answered. Lucy giggled. Have I ever told you how cute it is that you and Ben have those little pet names for each other? She asked. Hey, Doofus, she said, imitating Gwen's voice. Hey, dweeb, she said, imitating Ben's voice. She laughed. So cute. I can just feel the love when you guys do that. Yeah, nothing says I love you like insulting nicknames, Gwen snicked. Pfft, oh come on. I know you go all doe-eyed every time he calls you dweeb, Lucy countered, saying dweeb in Ben's voice. Lucy, quit it. Gwen snapped. Oh, right. No boy talk. Sorry. Forgot. Lucy made the lip-zipping gesture again. Gwen rolled her eyes. Once they were finished putting their things away, they went back outside. They found Max walking back across the front lawn. Ready to go, girls? He asked. Yeah, I think that's everything, Gwen answered. After saying goodbye to Gwen's parents, they all got back in the rust bucket. Lucy was giddy with excitement, bouncing up and down and saying let's go. Let's go. Let's go. As they entered the vehicle. Now safely away from Gwen's parents, Lucy sat and talked with Gwen at the breakfast table. She wanted to know about every kind of alien Gwen and the others had ever seen. She'd already heard a few of their stories, but she wanted to hear more. Since she was from another planet, she'd seen a good number of aliens herself, but some of what Ben and Gwen had seen were totally new to her as well. After driving for a bit, the rust bucket came to a stop. What's going on? Why are we stopped? Are we there already? Lucy asked, looking around frantically. We're at Ben's house, Gwen said, pointing out the window. Ben must have been waiting for them to arrive, because he ran out the door as soon as he saw them. Ben! Lucy shouted, getting up and running out the door. Gwen was excited to see him too, but somehow Lucy's enthusiastic reaction made her unenthusiastic. She got up and followed Lucy outside in time to see Lucy practically collide with Ben as she went to hug him. Come on, let's go. Lucy grabbed Ben's arm to pull him along. Whoa, okay, Ben said, almost losing his balance. Hey. Gwen greeted Ben. Hey, Gwen. Ben returned her greeting as Lucy dragged him past her and into the rust bucket, leaving Gwen standing there. Ben's parents came out of the house and Max stepped outside to chat with them. Gwen decided to talk with them for a bit as well, then she went back into the rust bucket. Inside, Ben was in the middle of a story. Lucy sat at the table, giving him her undivided attention as he recounted a fight they'd had with an alien during their second summer trip. I used Cannonbolt for the next part. Have I shown you Cannonbolt yet? Ben asked. Lucy shook her head. Man, as soon as we're on the road, I'm showing you all the rest of my aliens, he said, sitting down next to her. He held up the Omnitrix and Lucy leaned in to look as he turned the dial, flipping through his aliens. See, here's Cannonbolt, Wildvine, Beanwolf. Wait, is that what you call the Yenaldushi alien? Beanwolf? Gwen interrupted. That's even lamer than the names you usually give those things. Lucy laughed. Hey. It's a good name. It's like, with a werewolf, you switch between a man and a wolf. But with Beanwolf, I switch between Ben and a wolf, Ben explained, defending his alien's nickname. That only makes sense if a werewolf was called a man-wolf, or if you switched between a wolf and a were, Gwen countered. Lucy laughed again, enjoying the banter. Whatever. Ben threw his hands in the air. It's a work in progress. I don't use that one much anyway. A few minutes later, Max called to them from outside the rust bucket. After saying goodbye to Ben's parents, the trip was finally ready to begin. Once they were on the road, Gwen sat down and took out her laptop. Lucy excitedly went up to Ben. Okay. It's alien time. She said. No. We say hero time, Ben corrected her. Whatever, Lucy said. Now, let me see them aliens. You got it, Ben said confidently. He turned the dial on the Omnitrix, selecting Cannonbolt. He hit the button and transformed, suddenly taking up the width of the rust bucket. Careful, Ben. Max shouted from the driver's seat. Transform into something too heavy and you might fall right through the floor. Sorry, Grandpa, Cannonbolt said. Whoa. Lucy said. I've never seen an Arbarian Pelaritar before. I thought they were extinct. Then Lucy gasped like she just had a bright idea. She collapsed herself into a pile of purple mud and reformed as a copy of Cannonbolt. Aha! I can do that too. She said proudly. Cannonbolt laughed. Awesome. Too bad we're not outside right now. We should totally have a Cannonbolt race later. Lucy melted down and transformed into her human form again. Nah, we wouldn't be able to do that anyway. Just cause I can look like your aliens doesn't mean I can copy their powers, she said. Oh. Darn, that would have been so much fun, Cannonbolt complained. Yeah, oh well, Lucy said. Okay, next one. She said, gesturing with her hands eagerly. Well, it doesn't exactly work like that, Cannonbolt said, scratching the side of his head. I kinda gotta wait for the Omnitrix to time out. Then I might have to wait a little bit longer for it to warm up before I can change again, he explained. "Oh, man," Lucy complained. "So, what bad guys did you use Cannonbolt for?" she asked, curious as ever. "Well, the first thing I ever fought with this one was a giant tick that tried to suck out the planet's guts. There were also these weird alien cultist dudes who followed the tick around because they thought it was a god or something." "Those guys were weird," Ben explained. "Yeah, you're one to talk," Gwen quipped without looking up from her laptop. That got a few giggles from Lucy. Yeah, what?" Cannonbolt started to talk as the Omnitrix began to beep. Mid-sentence, he reverted back to Ben. "Ever, dweeb?" Lucy grinned. "Finally. Show me another one." "Okay. Which one do you wanna see?" Ben asked. "Lemme see that." Lucy ran up to Ben and stood behind him. Putting her chin on his shoulder, she wrapped her arms around him and grabbed the Omnitrix. Hey. Ben turned a little red at Lucy's severe personal space violation. Gwen also looked up from her laptop and glared at her. Lucy didn't seem to notice. She held up Ben's Omnitrix arm and turned the dial herself, flipping through the aliens. "Ooh, what's this one?" she asked, a particular image on the Omnitrix catching her eye. Oh. That's way big. I'm definitely not turning into him indoors," Ben declared. "Oh, man," Lucy whined. She flipped to the next alien. "This one?" she asked. "That's I guy. He's a little weird looking," Ben explained. "Oh. Show me. Lucy repeated. Okay, Ben stepped out of Lucy's embrace and transformed. Lucy giggled. "You, an opticoid. You weren't kidding about the weird part." Lucy laughed again, then transformed herself into a copy of Ben's alien. "Whoa," she said, flexing her eye-covered arms and looking around with them. "This is way messed up. I've never tried putting my eyes anywhere but my face." Guy laughed. "Yeah, it takes some getting used to. You should try being Wild Mutt. That one's got no eyes at all." "Awesome." Lucy melted down to her human form again. "How many of them do you have, anyway?" I dunno. I think, like, 30 or 40 now." Guy guessed. "And all of them are cool enough to be superheroes on their own," he declared. "Wow, I can't wait to fight some bad guys." "When do we do that?" Lucy asked. As Ben and Lucy continued to talk, Gwen closed her laptop. She got up and walked to the front of the rust bucket and sat in the passenger seat next to her grandfather. Noticing Gwen sit down next to him, Max spoke. "Well, they certainly seem to get along well," Max commented, having overheard Ben and Lucy's whole exchange so far. Gwen sighed. "Yeah, sure do," she said. Max glanced at her. She looked a little forlorn. "Something wrong, Gwen?" he asked. Gwen looked over her shoulder at Ben and Lucy, still excitedly flipping through the Omnitrix. "It's nothing," she said. It took 3 days for Ben, Gwen, Lucy, and Max to encounter their first aliens of the summer. They were stopped at a campground which was full of RVs belonging to other people who decided to spend their summer camping and traveling. Max loved walking around and chatting with everyone, but Ben didn't like it because the other campers were mostly older people. However, Ben's annoyance was soon forgotten when a group of beige, humanoid dinosaurs started rampaging through the campgrounds, flipping over trailers and tossing people left and right. Ben, Gwen, and Lucy were sitting around their campfire when they heard the screams of the other campers and the roars of the dinosaur aliens. Ben and Gwen stood up immediately, looking at each other. Ben smiled, and Gwen gave a light nod. They were about to rush into action when Lucy hopped up too. "Yahoo!" she shouted. "All right, guys. Let's do this. Alien time." "Hero time," Ben insisted. Gwen regarded Lucy hesitantly. She had doubts about Lucy's fighting ability. Gwen had her magic, Ben had his watch, but as far as Gwen could tell, Lucy could only shapeshift. That was definitely useful, but it didn't seem like it would help her in a fight. She was about to voice her concern, but Ben was already high-fiving Lucy, apparently not sharing her concern. The two of them took off in the direction of the commotion, so Gwen shrugged it off and followed them. When they reached the clearing where all the noise was coming from, they counted 8 aliens. In addition to the aliens, there were plenty of injured and panicking campers, trashed campsites, and burning RVs. "Lucy, what are those?" Gwen asked. Lucy knew more about aliens than Gwen and Ben did, which Gwen had gathered from the way Lucy could give the actual names of Ben's aliens. She figured Lucy might recognize the brown lizard men. "I have no idea," Lucy stated. "But I'm still gonna take them down." Her human form melted away into her muddy purple humanoid form. But then, she continued to change, growing larger and less humanoid. Her arms and neck extended, her face lost its shape, her eyes grew large and beady, and long purple whiskers and antennae extended from her head. She looked like Camille's parents did back when they attacked Joel at the wedding 2 years ago. Lucy let out a roar. Most of the campers in the area started fleeing if they weren't already, but she got the attention of the dinosaur aliens. "Cool," Ben said, staring up at Lucy's true form in awe. Gwen was a little freaked out by Lucy's sudden transformation, but she tried to ignore it. She targeted one of the other aliens and hurled some of her standard magic attacks at it. 2 of the aliens ran at Lucy. With her long, gooey arms, she swooped them both up, bonked their heads together, and threw them in opposite directions into the woods surrounding them. Lucy giggled in her ordinary cute little girl voice, which sounded really strange coming from her current monstrous form. A 3rd alien ran up and, with a roar, punched Lucy's arm, splattering it. "Owie!" Lucy shouted in minor pain, as if someone had just stepped on her foot. Her muddy body moved like a tidal wave and came crashing down on the alien that had punched her. She reformed, and 2 new arms extended, holding the alien out in front of her. She moved her arms behind her back, then launched the alien like she was a catapult. She giggled again. "Damn, Lucy!" Ben shouted, watching her fight. "I didn't know you were such a boss at this." "Hey, doofus!" Gwen shouted in between energy blasts. "Now would be a good time to go hero, don't you think?" She sounded annoyed. "Oh, yeah," Ben said, as if he'd just remembered what they were doing. He held up his watch hand to select an alien. "Yeah, Ben," Lucy said, turning to look at him. "Show me what you got." "Well then, feast your eyes on this." Ben slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix. In a moment, he was Diamond Head. "Let's do this thing," he shouted, charging at an alien and shoulder-checking it, sending it hurtling back into the side of an RV. He ran up and grabbed the alien, then spun it around a few times before releasing it, tossing it into another alien. "How do you like that?" he asked, turning to Lucy. "Would you quit showing off?" Gwen shouted at Ben. She'd almost said showing off for her but decided to cut herself off at the last second. Pfft, whatever Diamond Head said, offhandedly punching an alien in the face. The fight didn't last long. The aliens all either ran away or were knocked unconscious by some combination of Ben, Gwen, and Lucy's assault. The Omnitrix beeped, and Ben turned back into himself. Lucy also shrank back down and took her default human shape again. The three of them regrouped and headed back to the rust bucket. That was so awesome, Lucy said excitedly as she skipped in circles around Ben and Gwen on the walk back. Did you see that? They were like wham, and I was all like bam, and Ben was like ka blam. Lucy made her own little sound effects to describe the fight as if it were something out of a comic book. She stopped skipping, landing right in front of Ben and stopping him in his tracks. She leaned in uncomfortably close, smiling expectantly. So? She asked, her eyes darting between Ben and Gwen. Ben just stared back awkwardly, and Gwen looked irritated. How'd I do? Lucy asked. Oh, Ben said. You were amazing. Yeah, Gwen said. I didn't know you were that big. Gwen's initial doubts about Lucy's ability to fight turned out to be unfounded after all. She realized having Lucy on the team might actually be quite beneficial. Eh? Lucy jumped several feet into the air, throwing her fist up triumphantly. Oh, this is gonna be the best summer ever, she declared, going back to skipping in circles around the other two. You know it, Ben said, high-fiving Lucy as she passed by him. Gwen smiled lightly, but said nothing. She still wasn't sure how she felt about all of this yet. The battle had gone well, and Lucy was as friendly as ever, but something felt off to her. What is going on here? July, Year 2. Ben sat outside, flipping through his aliens. The Omnitrix still liked to randomly scan new aliens he encountered and add their DNA to its database, and he still hadn't quite figured out how it worked. He had a few new ones that he hadn't realized the Omnitrix had scanned, and he was trying to decide which one to try first. Ben stopped when the screen displayed the silhouette of one of the dinosaur aliens they'd fought last month. All right, he declared excitedly. He thought those aliens had been pretty cool, and they looked very strong, despite how easily he and the girls had taken them all out. Without another thought, he stood and slammed his hand down on the watch. Newly transformed, Ben let out a mighty roar. I am Humungusaur. Ben thought that sounded like a cool name. Ben heard a voice from behind him. Wow, cool. Ah. Humungusaur squealed. As he spun around in surprise, he tripped on his new tail and fell over. As Ben lied on the ground, Lucy walked up next to him and leaned over, looking down at him and giggling. Humungusaur, ha. Nice name. How did you get that one in your watch? I don't know. Humungusaur stood up and examined himself. It happens sometimes when I fight aliens. The Omnitrix scans their DNA on its own. Lucy nodded. So, what can this one do? She asked. Let's see. Humungusaur glanced around and spotted a large boulder on the ground. He walked over to it and lifted it over his head. Wow, I feel stronger than 4 arms. He held the boulder in one hand and effortlessly tossed it into the air. It stayed airborne for a long moment before landing in his other outstretched hand. Then he dropped it to the ground with a crash. What else can I do? Suddenly, he started growing. Whoa, what? Ben watched as the ground got farther and farther away until he was 15 feet tall. Awesome! Check me out! I'm huge! He said, examining his hands and arms. I can do that too. Lucy maintained her human shape, but she grew until she was eye level with Humungusaur. See? The beeping of the Omnitrix signaled the end of the new alien's test run. Ben turned back into his regular self. Unprepared for the sudden size change, he stumbled and fell to the ground again. Lucy laughed at him, then shrank back down and held out her hand. That was neat, she said as she pulled Ben to his feet. What are the new ones you got? Show me, show me. Lucy hopped up and down in excitement, her hand clutching Ben's watch arm. I'm not sure. I think I got a few other new ones, but I haven't tried them yet, Ben explained. Do you have a len open? Lucy asked. A what? Ben generally didn't know the real names of the alien species in the Omnitrix, since he thought the names he made up were a lot cooler. Lucy laughed. Me, silly. I'm a len open. Oh, really? I thought you guys were called sludge puppies. That's what Max had called them when they first met Lucy and her family 2 years ago. Ben hadn't realized it was just a nickname. Nah, that's just what the plumbers call us. 'Cause we're so sludgy. Lucy punctuated her sentence by turning her arms into tendrils of purple mud and rubbing them in Ben's face. You, gross. Ben said, trying to shove her arms away. Lucy laughed as she returned her arms to their human state. So, do you have one? She asked, still curious. Ben said, hastily flipping through his newest aliens. I don't think so. Lucy pouted, then she smiled and gasped like she had a great idea. Use me. She happily shouted. What? Ben asked, confused. My DNA. You can add me to the Omnitrix. Then you can turn into a len open just like me. Lucy was excitedly hopping up and down again. I don't know how to do it on purpose, though. The Omnitrix just kinda does it on its own, Ben reminded her. Lucy stood and stared at the Omnitrix for a moment. She furrowed her brow like she was deep in thought. Then, without a word, she turned her hands into mud again and wrapped them around the Omnitrix. Whoa, hey! Lucy, what are you doing? Ben tried to pull his hand away, but Lucy held on tight. Lucy shook the Omnitrix back and forth, trying to push some of her mud between the cracks of it or something. Then it started beeping. Not the kind of beeping like it was timing out or self-destructing, but something else. Lucy pulled her hands back. She and Ben both watched as the Omnitrix blinked yellow-orange a few times before returning to normal. Did it work? Lucy asked. Ben started flipping through the Omnitrix. He recognized all the silhouettes at first, and he was about to say no, but then he saw a new icon. Whoa, I think it did. He said in amazement. Lucy squealed in excitement and clapped her hands together. I guess it scanned you while you were messing with it. Try it, try it, try it. Lucy chanted. Ben held his hand over the Omnitrix. Before he had a chance to press the button himself, Lucy put her hand over his and pressed it into the button. He transformed. Ben was expecting to turn into the Lucy he knew, but instead, he grew and morphed into Lucy's true form, the form she had taken when fighting the Humungusaurs. Whoa! This is weird, Ben said. Eh? This is so awesome, Lucy declared, squealing with delight. You look just like me. Meanwhile, Gwen was inside the rust bucket, working on her laptop with her headphones in. She hadn't heard any of the commotion from Humongous or earlier, but she happened to take her headphones out a moment ago. Now she was curious as to why Ben and Lucy were making so much noise outside. Stepping outside the rust bucket, Gwen saw Lucy in her giant, monstrous Lenopen form. But, right next to her, she also saw Lucy. Human Lucy. What the? Gwen took a few hesitant steps towards them, assessing the situation. Lucy, what is going on out here? Gwen asked, speaking up to get Lucy's attention. She was assuming the second Lenopen was a friend or relative of Lucy's. Gwen wasn't on high alert because Lucy seemed happy to see it, but she knew to be cautious since Lenopens didn't usually get along with humans. Gwen. Check it out. The larger Lenopen said. It started slinking across the ground towards her. How do you know my name? Gwen asked. Seeing the huge alien coming towards her caused Gwen to take a step back and assume a pose like she was ready for the possibility of a fight. Lucy giggled. Relax, Gwen. She walked up to Gwen while the other Lenopen shrank down and molded itself into a copy of Lucy's human form. What the? Gwen looked back and forth between the two completely identical girls. She had no idea what was going on. The two Lucys stood in front of her and laughed. Look, Gwen. There's two of me. The Lucys high-fived and laughed some more. Ah, Lucy. I'm serious. What's going on? Gwen asked. One of the Lucys morphed into Ben. Psych. He said. It's me. You. Gwen glared at him, then rolled her eyes and sighed. So, the Omnitrix accidentally scanned Lucy, and now you can shapeshift too. Is that it? Well, not exactly, but pretty much. And it rules, by the way. Yeah. Now we're both awesome, Lucy said, stretching her torso and twisting in place several times before letting herself spin. She quickly lost her balance and nearly fell over, but she managed to recover in time. Gwen heard the Omnitrix beeping and she turned her attention to Ben. However, the beeping didn't seem to be coming from him. It sounded like it was coming from Lucy. Gwen looked back and forth between them, certain she was hearing it wrong somehow. Suddenly, Lucy turned into Ben in a flash of light. Now, instead of two Lucys, there were two Bens. What? Gwen was more confused than ever, and she was having ditto flashbacks. The Bens laughed. One of them, the one who had turned into Ben first, morphed into a pile of purple mud, then reformed as a human Lucy. Psych. She said, the excitement clear in her voice. Gotcha again, Gwen. She burst into giggles. Gwen gawked at the sight. So, you were you, but you were you, she said, her hands moving back and forth as she pointed to Ben and Lucy. The two of them laughed at her confusion. She sighed. You guys are nuts. Lucy smiled brightly like it was a compliment, and Ben gave her a teasing smile. So, what happened? Gwen asked. Did you finally figure out how to scan aliens manually? Gwen looked to Ben, or at least she hoped it was the real Ben. No. Well, sort of. We did it on purpose, but all she did was touch it. But that's not how it always works, Ben tried to explain. She just touched it and it scanned her. Gwen asked. Yaha. Lucy nodded in agreement. I gave him some of my DNA. You, gross. Don't say it like that, Gwen complained. Lucy giggled, then suddenly hugged Ben. And now, a part of me will always be with you. Ah, thanks. Ben blushed and pulled back a little, not sure what to do. Lucy didn't let go of him and looked him right in the eyes, her little smirk giving away how much she was enjoying his awkwardness. Lucy felt a hand on her shoulder. Lucy, remember that little talk we had about personal space? Gwen said before yanking her off of Ben. Ben cleared his throat, straightening out his t-shirt awkwardly. Thanks, he said to Gwen. Don't mention it. Lucy smirked teasingly. Careful, Gwen. Guys don't like clingy girls. Weren't you just literally clinging to him? Gwen countered. Lucy gave her a questioning look and held up her hands slightly, like she thought Gwen was missing the point. Also, you. There it is. Lucy snapped and made finger guns at Gwen. Gwen sighed. You are such a little. Gwen felt a hand on her shoulder. Hey, Ben said. Look, sorry about the whole shape-shifting prank, okay? It was just a joke. You don't gotta be that annoyed with her. It took Gwen a moment to figure out what he was talking about. She hadn't been thinking about the prank, but Ben's intervention made her realize how irritable she'd been acting. Right. Sorry. She turned to Lucy as she apologized and caught a glimpse of Lucy looking a little guilty herself. But she quickly smiled. Nah, don't worry. It was my bad. An uncomfortable air hung over them for a moment. So, wanna head back inside? Ben suggested, gesturing towards the rust bucket. Gwen and Lucy nodded, then followed him inside. A few days later. Gwen slept in late, which was unusual for her. When she got up, she walked out of the bedroom to find Lucy sitting at the table. Morning, sleepyhead, Lucy greeted her. Good morning, Lucy, Gwen said, grabbing some cereal and sitting down across from her. Where's Ben and my grandpa? She asked, noticing she and Lucy were the only ones in the rust bucket. Oh, they're on a super-secret Omnitrix-type mission, Lucy explained. Gwen gave her a look, confused. Nah, just kidding, Lucy said. They're getting groceries and some camping supplies, and your grandpa said something about meeting an old friend of his, I think. Why didn't they take us with them? Gwen asked. They would've, but you were sleeping. And I stayed behind so you wouldn't be alone when you woke up. Ben wanted to stay behind too, but your grandpa insisted on dragging him along, Lucy explained. So that means you and me get to spend the whole day together, just the two of us. Lucy said triumphantly. Oh. Cool, Gwen said. She wasn't entirely sure if that was a good thing. The two of them chatted for a bit while Gwen finished her breakfast. It reminded Gwen of the mornings she'd spent with Lucy while she was staying at her house before summer vacation began. As energetic as Lucy normally was, she was a little calmer and more reserved in the morning just after waking up. Gwen appreciated being able to keep up with her for a change. Let's do something fun, Lucy suggested as Gwen put her dishes in the sink. Okay, Gwen agreed. Like what? Lucy thought for a moment. Ooh, I know. Teach me karate. Why do you want to learn karate? You can just go giant mud alien when you need to fight bad guys, Gwen said. Well, you can do magic, and you still do karate, Lucy countered. Fair point, Gwen said. Okay. Sure, I can show you some basic stuff. Eh? Lucy cheered. Let's go. Gwen and Lucy went outside. They didn't have anything to practice on, so they piled up some cushions and other junk into a makeshift punching bag. Lucy shape-shifted her clothes into a karate gi. She put her hands together and bowed to Gwen. I am ready to learn, O wise teacher, she said. Gwen chuckled, then cleared her throat, preparing to begin her demonstration. Okay, now, I actually do both karate and judo. They're both weaponless, Japanese martial arts that focus on quick movements. Judo is more about holds and throws, while karate is about sharp, quick blows to sensitive parts of your opponent's body. Lucy laughed a little. What? Gwen asked. Nothing, I'm just remembering something Ben once said about how everything you say sounds like a book report. Gwen rolled her eyes. In that case, pretend this bag is Ben, and I'll demonstrate. She got into a stance in front of the punching bag, then hit it with a chop from the side with amazing speed. With a chop like that, you'd probably be aiming for the neck. Let me try. Lucy said, stepping up to the bag. Hi-ya! She shouted, bringing her arm way back, then swinging it at the bag. Take this. Lucy's hamminess made Gwen smiled. That's good, but you have to be faster. The way you held your arm out before striking would have broadcasted to your opponent what you were going to do, which would give them a chance to counter it. Gwen and Lucy switched off a few more times, with Gwen demonstrating and Lucy attempting to copy her. Awesome! Lucy started to get the hang of it. Can we do some kicks now? Lucy asked, kicking the air and almost losing her balance in the process. Well, there's not a lot of kicking in karate, actually. That's more taekwondo, Gwen explained. But it's good to know how to do it, I guess. She went on to show Lucy a few different kinds of kicks. The two of them kept practicing until Gwen accidentally knocked the punching bag over, causing the junk parts they assembled it with to break off and scatter all over the ground. Lucy laughed. Dang, Gwen, you don't know your own strength, she said admiringly. Gwen shrugged, but she smiled proudly. Next, Gwen showed Lucy some basics of judo. Only this time, they were practicing on each other, so Gwen tried to be a little more careful. Okay, Gwen said as she readied a demonstration. Lift your arm up like this, like you're trying to punch me. She took Lucy's arm and lifted it up. Lucy held it there. So now, if I grab you here and here, I can. In an instant, Gwen flipped Lucy to the ground and pinned her. Whoa! Lucy shrieked. It all happened with disorienting speed. Gwen stood up, then took Lucy's hand and helped her up. Okay, now you try, she said, holding up her arm the way Lucy had before. Lucy's grabs were a bit off their mark, but she was still able to knock Gwen over. Of course, she also lost her balance and fell on top of her. They both let out an oomph when they collided on the ground. Then they both started cracking up. Gwen started to sit up, but Lucy pushed her back down. Nah, I've got you now. And just like that, Gwen's attempt to teach Lucy judo turned into a playful wrestling session. They continued to laugh and spout hammy wrestling phrases as they tossed about, trying to pin one another to the ground. Okay, you win, Gwen said, panting as Lucy knelt on top of her. Lucy's arms pinned hers to the ground. As was expected of Lucy by now, she held her face uncomfortably close to Gwen's. You can get off me now. I dunno, I kinda like it here, Lucy said with a smirk. Gwen started blushing, even though she knew Lucy must just be messing with her on purpose. Oh, all right. Lucy giggled and stepped off of her, standing up. She held out both hands to help Gwen up. Gwen examined herself. She was covered in dirt, but she wasn't hurt in any way. Okay, I think that's all for this lesson. I need to get cleaned up. Are you sure? I don't mind if we get a little dirty, Lucy said, her smirk making the innuendo clearly intentional. Lucy, come on, Gwen complained. Lucy giggled. Okay, okay. Thanks for teaching me that stuff. It was a lot of fun. Gwen looked at Lucy's bright smile, and she couldn't help but smile back. Yeah, it was. Let me know if you ever want another lesson. Gwen went back inside the rust bucket and took a quick shower. Once she was finished and changed into a clean set of clothes, she was immediately greeted by Lucy again. Hey! You wanna go to the mall? Lucy asked. Gwen furrowed her brow and looked out the window. They were in a park. Ah, what mall? She asked. And won't Ben and my grandpa be back soon? We're not too far away from town. There's a mall there. Maybe. And the others still won't be back for a while. Probably, Lucy said, unconvincingly. You sure? Gwen asked. Lucy shrugged. Dunno. But they can just call us if we're not back by the time they get here. Now come on, let's go. Lucy grabbed Gwen and pulled her along. Gwen protested at first because she wanted to grab a few things, but they left shortly after. Lucy ended up being right. The town had a mall that looked like it was only a little smaller than the one in Bellwood. The first thing Lucy wanted to do was go shopping for clothes. Gwen didn't mind, since she liked to do that too, but she was still curious as to why Lucy liked it so much. As they walked down an aisle, Lucy spotted a dress that she seemed to like. A sly look came across her face and she looked around. No one was nearby except for Gwen. She spun around and shape-shifted her clothes into a perfect copy of the dress. Tather. What do you think? She asked Gwen, striking a pose. Lucy. Gwen said in an urgent whisper. You can't shape-shift in public like that, remember? Relax, Gwen, she said. Nobody saw. She morphed her clothes back into her favorite star shirt and red skirt. Then she reached out and felt the fabric of the dress still hanging on the rack. Maybe I'll get this one, she said. Lucy, I've been meaning to ask you, why do you buy clothes at all? Gwen asked. Couldn't you just, shape-shift whatever clothes you wanted? Like you just did. Lucy shrugged. Real clothes are better. We don't really have them on my planet, so they're kinda fun, I guess. Looking around, she spotted another dress she liked. Ooh. She said, pointing to it. How about you try that one? She said to Gwen. Gwen thought back to the time she'd tried on a dress in front of Ben. She blushed a little. No thanks. I don't really like dresses. Lucy tilted her head. You wore a dress to my cousin's wedding, she pointed out. Well, that's a little different, Gwen said. I don't mind too much when it's formal. But wearing a dress, just like, whenever isn't really my thing, I guess. Oh, come on. Lucy begged. You'd look so pretty in this. Gwen saw the exaggerated puppy dog look Lucy was giving her and sighed. Oh, fine, she acquiesced. Yes. Lucy jumped in the air. She grabbed the dress off the rack and shoved it into Gwen's arms. Come on, let's go. Lucy spotted a few more outfits she liked, so she grabbed a couple more of them before dragging Gwen to the changing area. In the changing room, Gwen slipped into the dress Lucy had picked out for her. She examined herself in the mirror. For a moment, she kind of liked how it looked. The pink color of the dress was actually kind of nice, and it fit really well. But once again, The pink dress reminded her of the one she'd tried on in front of Ben that one time. She let out a frustrated sigh. "This is stupid," she said under her breath. Wearing a sour expression, she stepped outside. Lucy was waiting for her. When she saw Gwen, she looked her up and down, and a huge smile spread across her face. "Wow, Gwen. You look amazing." Gwen was taken aback by how genuine Lucy's compliment sounded. The last time she'd tried on clothes for someone, she'd barely gotten any response out of him at all. She smiled shyly. "You think so?" she asked. "Oh, totally." Lucy came closer and walked in a circle around her, examining the dress. "I just love it." Gwen appreciated the compliments, but all the attention was making her a little uncomfortable. "Well, thanks. But I still don't think I'll get it." "Oh, okay," Lucy relented. "I'm going to change back into my clothes, then you can try on your stuff," Gwen said, stepping back into the changing room. "Okie dokie," Lucy said. Back in the changing room, Gwen didn't start changing right away. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought of how Lucy had reacted to the sight of her. She couldn't help but smile. That was nice. Gwen and Lucy spent the rest of the day together at the mall. They wandered around checking out the shops, got some lunch, and even spent a little time at the arcade attached to the mall. It was almost exactly like when she hung out with Ben. Before it got too late, they left and began the walk back to the Rust Bucket. Along the way, they ate some ice cream they'd picked up just before leaving and made jokes about people they'd seen at the mall. At a rare moment when Lucy wasn't saying anything, Gwen decided to thank her. "Hey, thanks for hanging out with me today. It was fun." "Oh, no problem," Lucy said with a bright smile. Gwen had a thought. She had spent a lot of time with Lucy at home while they were living together, but whenever they went out to actually do something fun, they were with Ben too. And Ben was around at pretty much every other time this summer too. This was one of the first times she and Lucy had actually hung out, just the two of them. And Lucy had barely brought up Ben at all, not even for any of her boy talk. Lucy's a lot more fun when she's not around Ben. A few days later, the Rust Bucket pulled up and parked near a large shack off the side of the road. Ben, Gwen, and Lucy stepped outside to take a look. The shack had a weather vane shaped like a question mark on the roof, and there was a gigantic, eagle-headed totem pole on the ground beside the entrance. "What's this place?" Lucy asked, head tilted curiously. Gwen looked up at the sign on the roof. "Mystery Hack," she read. Ben laughed. "I'll say. This place looks like a dump," he said, taking note of how run down the whole place looked. "Looks like they're having a little trouble with the sign," Max said, walking up behind the kids. He pointed to the ground beside the building where a big red letter S was sticking out of the dirt. A goat had wandered over and was currently chomping on the big wooden letter. Lucy gasped. "Oh my gosh, a goat!" She ran towards it eagerly, hoping to pet it. "Why did we stop here, Grandpa?" Gwen asked. "Well, folks in town said it was the place to be if you're a tourist," he said. "Yeah, the place to be bored," Ben said. "Come on, Ben," Max said. "You haven't even seen inside yet. And look, Lucy's having fun." "That's 'cause she's Lucy." "Oh my gosh, a pig!" Lucy shouted in the distance. She ran out of sight around the side of the building. "Goats, pigs," Ben said, gesturing toward the goat and the direction Lucy had run off to. "What is this, some kind of farm? In the middle of the woods in Oregon?" Gwen asked. We fight aliens, Gwen. Stranger things have happened. But you're right, it's probably just another shitty tourist trap. Benjamin. Watch your language, Max scolded him. I'm gonna go take a look inside. You two go keep an eye on Lucy. Okay, Grandpa, Gwen said with a nod. She waited for him to be out of earshot before lightly hitting Ben on the shoulder. Hey! Ben complained. Don't swear in front of Grandpa, doofus. Oh, grow up. Gwen gave him a look that said really. You think you're the mature one now? Ben groaned. Fine. Sorry. Gwen's expression softened. Are you okay? Yeah. Guess I'm just tired this morning. Gwen nodded her acceptance. Then she grabbed him by the wrist. All right. Let's go make sure Lucy hasn't turned that pig into bacon by now. Ben allowed himself to be dragged around the corner to the other side of the building. There, they found Lucy and another girl. They were both kneeling on the ground, rubbing the pig's belly. He's so cute. Lucy exclaimed. I know. Isn't he the bestest pig ever? The other girl looked about their age. She had braces, brown hair, and wore a very colorful sweater. Isn't she hot in that thing? Gwen gave him a surprised look, like he'd just said something inappropriate out of the blue. Like, temperature-wise? Not like that. It's summer, why's she wearing a sweater? The sound of a door opening followed by footsteps came from the back of the building. A boy came around the corner behind Lucy and the sweater girl. He also looked about their age, with brown hair and a hat that had a little pine tree on it. He looked so much like the sweater girl, Ben thought they might have been siblings at first. But then he saw them interact with each other. There you are, Hat Boy said. Aru. Sweater girl made an odd sound as she turned to give him her attention. Come inside, I gotta show you something. The boy said excitedly. Sweater girl smiled. She ran up and hugged him in a very Lucy-like fashion. Whoa-ho, okay, this is happening, the boy said, chuckling a little as he returned the hug. What's going on out here? He asked. Ooh, check it out. I met someone else who recognizes Waddles' greatness. Sweater girl gestured to Lucy and the pig. Lucy looked up at them curiously. The pig oinked. The boy suddenly realized the three strangers around him. He glanced at Lucy, then at Ben, and then at Gwen. When he saw Gwen, he looked surprised. He stared at her for a moment, but Gwen could tell he was looking up a bit too much, like he was looking at her hair or her forehead for some reason. Hi. He said. He grabbed Sweater Girl by the hand. We'll, see you inside in a minute. He disappeared around the corner, pulling the girl with him. Ben and Gwen stood still for a moment, while Lucy continued petting the pig. Who were those kids? Ben asked Lucy. Lucy shrugged. I dunno, but I love 'em, she said as she stood up. And they're totally heading inside to hook up right now, right? Gwen made a slightly grossed out face. That's not really our business, Lucy, she said, even though Lucy's speculation seemed accurate. Gwen, did you know that guy from somewhere? Ben asked. He'd noticed the way Hat Boy was looking at her. Gwen shook her head. Hey, do I have something on my forehead? She asked, patting her forehead with her hands. Ben glanced at it. No. Why? I don't know. That guy was kinda looking at me strangely. Lucy giggled as she walked up to Gwen. He's probably just into redheads. She reached out and ran her hand through Gwen's hair. Gwen slapped her hand away. "Lucy," she said sternly. I know. Lucy looked around. "Where's your grandpa?" "He went inside," Gwen said. "'Kay. Let's go inside too." "What is this place anyway?" "A farm," Lucy asked. "Right," Ben interjected. Lucy gasped. "Do they have more animals to pet inside?" "We don't know. We haven't gone inside yet." "But probably not," Gwen said. "I'll ask my grandpa if we can stop by a petting zoo another day though, if you want." Lucy looked amazed. "They have those?" The conversation was getting a little too cute for Ben, so he decided to go on ahead. He walked back to the front of the building and went in the front entrance where Max had gone in. Inside the shack was a ton of weird junk. Signs with question marks and phrases like "Be amazed" covered the walls, which reminded Ben of all the signs around the giant rubber band ball they'd seen at another lame tourist trap during their first summer trip. A cheap toy flying saucer hung from the ceiling with a price tag on it, which made Ben wonder if it was for sale or if the owners just hadn't bothered to take the tag off when they bought it. Glass jars full of strange colored liquids could be seen on various shelves and tables, usually covered with warning labels or having what Ben hoped were fake body parts suspended inside of them. I wonder if a hoarder just put up a sign outside their house and started charging admission. As Ben walked through the shack in search of his grandfather, he spotted someone sitting at the checkout counter of the gift shop that made him stop in his tracks. She looked a bit older than him, probably just starting high school. She wore a green flannel shirt and a lumberjack cap, and she had her boots up on the counter as she leaned back in her chair, reading a magazine. But what was perhaps most striking to Ben was the girl's long, flowing red hair. Whoa. Ben hadn't felt this way from looking at a girl since he first saw Kai. Ben heard giggling from behind him. "See? What'd I tell ya? Redheads." "Ah." Ben jumped in surprise, spinning around. Gwen and Lucy had been standing behind him. "You Spitfires have all the luck," Lucy said to Gwen. Gwen furrowed her brow. "You could have been a redhead if you wanted to be." "Oh, right," Lucy said, apparently forgetting she didn't technically have any hair at all. I'm more of a Cassie than a Barbara anyway." She turned her attention back to Ben. "Good to know you've got a type though, Benjamin." "Don't call me that," Ben said. "And besides, that's not my type. I'm kinda put off of redheads forever from having to deal with this dweeb all my life, thank you very much." He offhandedly pointed with his thumb towards Gwen. "Oh, what a coincidence," Gwen said with fake kindness. "That's pretty much the same reason I could never date a dumb guy." Ben was about to respond to that, but he noticed Lucy covering her mouth like she was trying to avoid bursting with laughter. He cleared his throat, deciding to drop the subject. "So, you guys checked this place out yet?" "What a bunch of crap." "It is kinda lame," Gwen agreed. "Oh, I don't know about that," Lucy said. "Take a look at these cool pictures." She pointed at a bunch of photographs hung up on the wall showing various creatures. One showed a pterodactyl flying over what looked like the trees outside the shack. Another had a very angry garden gnome growling at the camera. And another showed some kind of scarecrow-looking thing wearing a yellow mask with a jack-o'-lantern face on it. "Probably just Photoshop," Gwen said skeptically. "And that one right there is clearly just a guy in a costume." Lucy shrugged, stepping away from the photos. "Ooh, what kind of animal is that?" she asked, pointing at a taxidermy rabbit with antlers. "Ah, It's not a real animal. It's probably a rabbit with deer antlers, Gwen explained. How do you know they're not real? Lucy asked. They just aren't. You probably said the same thing about aliens until you met one. Gwen held up a finger and opened her mouth to retort, but she couldn't think of anything to say. That's a surprisingly good point, Ben said. He looked at the Omnitrix and briefly considered trying to scan the taxidermy animal. You never know. Lucy looked all around the room. I'm gonna go try and find those kids with the pig, Lucy said. I wanna know what they're all about. And how I can get a pig. Lucy took off, skipping towards the back of the shack. Just because magic and aliens are real, doesn't mean everything paranormal has to be real, right? Gwen asked Ben. How should I know? Ben shrugged. But honestly, at this point, I'd believe you if you told me Santa Claus was an alien who gave out presents to lure people into a false sense of security for when his kind invades the planet or some bullshit. Would you quit swearing so much? Why? Grandpa's not here. Whatever. Say, where is Grandpa anyway? I don't know. Maybe he's further inside. Ben and Gwen spent another 10 minutes wandering around the shack, pointing out cheap ripoffs and making jokes about the obvious hoaxes. Eventually, they found Max in one of the back rooms, chatting and laughing with another old man wearing a black suit and a red fez. Grandkids, huh? The old man said. Ha ha, I know how that goes. I got my great-niece and nephew staying with me this summer. Bunch of little hell racers, aren't they? They sure are, Max agreed with a laugh. Well, here they are now. Ben, Gwen, this man is the owner of this fine establishment, he said, introducing the man he was chatting with. Hello, sir. Hey there, kids. Enjoying your journey into the world of mystery? The owner asked. Well. Gwen began. This place is really lame, Ben said bluntly. Yeah, whatever. Just buy something on your way out, will ya? The old man said offhandedly. Then he turned back to Maximum. Hey, let me show you my collection of questionably authentic trinkets I've picked up from my travels around the world. Sounds wonderful. Max agreed, following the owner out of the room. Ben and Gwen didn't follow them. You got any money? Ben asked. Nope. Gwen shook her head. Well, sucks for that guy. Wanna bail and go play video games in the rust bucket? Sure. I don't think I can stand all this fake paranormal stuff much longer anyway. Sometime later, Ben and Gwen were still playing video games when the door to the rust bucket opened loudly. Woohoo! Lucy shouted, jumping inside. Max followed close behind her. Good. You're already back. Ready to get going? Max asked, heading for the driver's seat. Yes, please, Ben said. Lucy sat at the table across from Ben and Gwen. Hey. Where'd you two run off to? She asked. Here, Gwen said. Where were you? Lucy smiled smugly and held out her phone. I got both their numbers. She said proudly, her phone displaying her contacts list. Who, those kids from earlier? Ben asked, leaning in to read her phone screen. Yaha. Lucy said. You should have seen how awkward and sweaty the dude got when I asked for his number. It was hilarious. Is that them? He asked, pointing to two names listed one after the other. Yaha. Ben raised an eyebrow. They had the same last name. Wait, what? Were they home? Lucy turned her phone around to look at it. Oh. Yeah, turns out there weren't a couple. They were twins. Twins. Ben and Gwen said in unison. Yep. They seemed like way too close for siblings, Ben said. Yeah. I thought they were dating too, Gwen agreed. Lucy giggled. You know, they actually thought the same about you guys. What? Ben and Gwen spoke at the same time again. They saw you holding hands. Lucy explained. No, we weren't. Gwen insisted. Yeah. She was just grabbing my wrist and dragging me around. Ben agreed. Ben and Gwen turned to look at each other. They realized they were sitting shoulder to shoulder and quickly slid apart. Lucy laughed uproariously at their reaction. Man, I should have gotten that on video. You guys are priceless. Ben and Gwen were both annoyed, but they wordlessly agreed to never speak of this again. They went back to playing video games in an attempt to ignore Lucy while she texted on her phone. Who would think that about us? Ben couldn't get his mind off of it so easily. He looked at Gwen. The memory of that pretty girl from the gift shop suddenly came to mind. Somehow, his mind blurred her together with Gwen, and he imagined what she'd look like at that age and with longer hair. What is it? Gwen asked, noticing Ben was staring at her. Nothing, Ben said hurriedly. Luckily, Gwen seemed to shrug it off, but Ben was mortified. Freaking redheads. August, Year 2, Part 1. With only a few weeks left in the summer, Max decided they should stop by one of his old plumber bases on the way to their next stop. It was similar to the Mount Rushmore base, only it was smaller and had been abandoned even earlier. However, according to Max, it was still a fully stocked base with everything one would need to fight aliens, although any equipment left behind would be extremely outdated and probably not even in working condition. From the outside, the entrance looked like an old metal factory door in the side of a mountain. Is this it? Ben asked. He knocked on the door as if testing whether it was real or not. Don't let the exterior fake it fool you, Ben. The security here is still top-notch. Go ahead, try to get in, Max challenged him. Ben looked at him, then back at the door. He shrugged, grabbing the handle and pulling. The door came off its hinges, and Ben stepped out of the way as it crashed to the ground. Without a word, he gave Max a smug look. Gwen and Lucy giggled. Well, now that I think about it, the security in this place wasn't that great even when it was still in use, Max admitted. Anyway, come along, kids. I'll give you the grand tour. As Max had predicted, the base seemed pretty broken down, but he still proudly showed everything off like it was his pride and joy. Ben kept trying to touch everything, and Gwen had to be the one to enforce a no-touching rule after the third time he broke something. Lucy managed to fire off a dozen questions every time they entered a new room. As knowledgeable as Max was about the base, some of her questions were so oddly specific that they just plain stumped him. The base was full of old computers and some appropriated alien technology, but nothing seemed too impressive. That is, until they got to the shuttle bay. Whoa! Ben, Gwen, and Lucy all said at the same time. Max chuckled. Yep, she's really something. Not as nice as the rust bucket, though, if I do say so myself. The other rooms they'd seen so far were tiny in comparison. The bay extended several stories up. The rocket in its center looked like a cross between an Apollo rocket and a few different kinds of spaceships they'd seen over the years. Lucy stared up at the rocket. She'd come to this planet in a spaceship, and was probably more familiar with them than anyone else in the room, but she still looked really interested. "Does it still work?" she asked. "I'm not sure. It's an older model, and the base has been out of operation for some time. It might still work, but it probably isn't very safe," he said. "Let's take it for a spin," Ben suggested. Gwen lightly smacked him on the back of the head. "Were you even listening, doofus?" "Ow!" Ben moaned. Then Lucy walked up to him and smacked him on the head as well, although she did it so lightly he could barely feel it. "Hey, what was that for?" Lucy shrugged and giggled. "I don't think we'll be taking this rocket anywhere anytime soon. Besides, it's not exactly ours to take, even if this place has been decommissioned. Now come on, I'll show you the rec room next." Max waved them along. The tour continued for another hour or so, and was much the same as earlier. Max originally intended for them to spend the night in the living quarters, but he was outvoted when they saw how most of the beds had been chewed up by rats, or possibly some kind of alien that had gotten loose in the base. So, once they'd seen enough, they returned to the rust bucket for the night. Gwen awoke to the sound of a door closing. She checked the time on her phone, and saw it was still the middle of the night. Who's up at this hour? Her first guess was that Ben was up to something, so she got out of bed. But when she peered up at Ben's bunk, he was still there, fast asleep. The one who was missing from her bed was Lucy. Confused, Gwen went outside to follow her. As quietly as she could, she shut the rust bucket door behind her. In the darkness, she could just barely make out Lucy's form in the distance. She was going back into the old plumber base. What is she doing? Gwen followed her. She had to hurry a little to catch up. By the time she was inside the base, she was worried she might have lost Lucy. The base had many different rooms and it was kind of hard to navigate, so she had to look around. Eventually, she made her way to the mission control room for the rocket. Through the glass pane connecting the room to the large shuttle bay, she saw that the door to the shuttle was open. If she remembered correctly, it had been closed when they were there earlier. That can't be good. In another room, a door opened up to a steel catwalk extending to the door to the shuttle. Gwen hesitantly walked across it and went inside. She heard noise coming from up above her, so she climbed a nearby ladder up a few levels into what looked like a bridge. That's where she found Lucy. She was frantically moving around the room, fiddling with knobs and buttons and wires. She looked panicked, and in her distress, she didn't even notice Gwen until she spoke. "Lucy!" She jumped in surprise, and Gwen was taken aback as well. Lucy looked nothing like the energetic, perpetually happy girl that she was used to. She looked close to tears. I need to get this ship to work," she said. Gwen was dumbfounded, and the way Lucy was acting had her worried. "Lucy, what are you talking about? What are you doing in this thing? I need to help Camille. I have to," Lucy shouted. She was breathing heavily. For a moment, she and Gwen stared at each other. Then, Lucy's eye shed a tear, and she collapsed to her knees, staring off into space. Gwen quickly walked over and knelt in front of her, putting her hands on Lucy's shoulders. "Lucy, just calm down for a second, okay? Tell me what's going on. Why do you need to help Camille?" It was the first time in a while that Gwen had thought of Joel and Camille. Looking back, it made sense that something must be wrong. They'd been gone for months at this point, and it seemed like no one had even heard from them. Lucy took a few deep breaths, trying to calm herself. She volunteered to help Joel and the plumbers. They needed to stop a group of Lenopans from drawing attention to Earth because some of my planet's enemies could easily become your planet's enemies, and they are a whole lot worse than we are. Lucy. So she and Joel had to go off-world. I finally got a message from her saying they'd be back soon, but that was a month ago. They should have been back by now. If something's happened, if I need to help her. The panic in her eyes returned, and she buried her face in Gwen's shoulder. Gwen wrapped her arms around Lucy. She was worried now too, but she tried not to show it. It's okay, she said, trying to soothe her. I know you want to help her. Believe me, I understand. But you heard what my grandpa said. This ship is old and broken down. It could be dangerous. I don't care. Lucy lifted herself out of Gwen's embrace. She's my cousin. I'll do whatever it takes to save her. A hint of fear was still present in her eyes, but to Gwen, she looked brave and full of pride as she spoke. Gwen sighed and sat down across from Lucy. I know a thing or two about sneaking off planet to save my cousin, she said. Lucy stared back at Gwen. She could tell Gwen wasn't making it up to seem sympathetic. She knew how much Ben meant to her. What do you mean? She asked. At this point, Ben and Gwen had told Lucy about most of their adventures, but both of them had avoided talking about the time the Omnitrix self-destruct sequence was initiated. It wasn't something either of them liked to talk about. At the end of our first summer together, something happened to the Omnitrix. Tetrax, a Petrosapian friend of ours, came back to Earth and told us the Omnitrix's self-destruct mode had been activated. He took Ben off-world to find the creator of the Omnitrix so he could stop it. My grandpa wanted me to stay behind, but... Gwen hesitated. She had never really thought about her decision to sneak aboard Tetrax's ship, at least not enough to put her reasoning into words. At the time, it had just felt like the right thing to do. But Lucy was staring at her intently, so she continued. I don't know. I just knew he needed me. So I snuck onto Tetrax's ship, and went with them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucy said, Ben's lucky to have a cousin like you. Gwen smiled at that. But now, I need to do for my cousin what you did for yours. Lucy stood up and went back to fiddling with the ship's controls. I'm not saying you shouldn't, Gwen said, getting up and following her. And I want to help you. But when I went into space, I did it in a working alien craft, with an experienced pilot. If you can even manage to get this thing off the ground, for all you know, it'll just explode before it even escapes the atmosphere. Then what am I supposed to do? Lucy snapped. She looked desperately around the room. I can't just sit here doing nothing. Camille could already be. Lucy stammered. Gwen ran up to her and hugged her again. Lucy sobbed into her shoulder for a minute before she calmed back down. We can ask my grandpa, Gwen suggested. He still has connections with the plumbers. Maybe he can make some calls and find out what's going on with Joel and Camille. Lucy still looked like she wanted to cry, but she slowly nodded her head. Gwen took her by the hand and led her outside. Gwen and Lucy stood outside the rust bucket. Lucy still looked a little shaken up, so Gwen was trying to be delicate. Okay, Gwen spoke in a low voice. The others are still sleeping. We'll just wake up my grandpa, tell him you're worried about Camille, and ask if he can help us contact her. Everything's going to be fine, okay? Lucy nodded her head, but she wouldn't make eye contact. Quietly, Gwen opened the door and led Lucy inside. She walked over to Max and lightly shook him. "Grandpa! Grandpa, wake up!" Gwen spoke in slightly above a whisper, since she still didn't want to wake up Ben. "Huh? What?" Max rolled over and looked at Gwen. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the darkness. "Gwen. What is it?" He could see how distraught Lucy looked. "Is something wrong, kids?" Gwen and Lucy both nodded gravely. "Can we talk outside?" Gwen asked. The three of them left the rust bucket again. "Okay, girls. Tell me what's happening," Max said. Gwen looked at Lucy. She didn't look like she wanted to talk about it anymore, so she did the talking for her. "It's been a really long time since we've heard from Joel and Camille, and Lucy is starting to get worried. Can you help us contact them?" Max's eyes opened wide as he learned what was upsetting Lucy. "Sure, yes, of course I'll help. I still have a few ways to contact our off-world bases. I'm sure someone will be able to tell me what's going on with them," he said. Gwen hadn't known Joel and Camille were off-planet on plumber business until just minutes ago, so she was a little surprised to hear Max had known where they were this whole time. But, she figured, it made sense for him to stay informed about that side of the family. "There's a communications center in the base. There's bound to be at least one working piece of equipment in there. Follow me." Max led them back inside the broken-down plumber base. When they got to the comm station, Max stopped. Why don't you two wait out here?" Max told Gwen and Lucy before they entered. "I'm probably gonna have to use some top-secret codes and whatnot to contact them." To Gwen, this sounded like an excuse. But she figured her grandfather must have a good reason. After all, if he contacted the plumbers in front of Lucy, then she might end up getting some very bad news rather suddenly. If there were any problems, it would be best for him to break it to her gently. Gwen nodded, taking Lucy by the hand and leading her across the room to sit in some dusty chairs while Max went into the other room. Gwen looked at Lucy, who was staring off into space. She still looked anxious, and she hadn't said anything in a while. In fact, Gwen couldn't think of a time that Lucy had gone this long without speaking. Or smiling. Suddenly, Gwen realized that Lucy must have been distressed about Camille for a long time, possibly since the moment she left. How did she manage to act that happy and carefree for so long while she was dealing with this? She tried to think of something to say to her, but she knew the only thing that would make Lucy feel any better is news about Camille being okay. So they waited in silence for Max to return. It was another 20 minutes before the door to the comm room opened and Max stepped back out. Gwen stood up immediately, and Lucy looked at him with nervous anticipation. Max did a decent job of keeping his expression neutral, which immediately set off alarm bells in Gwen's head. If there was good news, he wouldn't have any reason to hide it. "I got in touch with some of the off-world plumbers, but they haven't had contact with the group Joel and Camille were with for a while," Max explained. Lucy sank into her chair. The news wasn't necessarily bad, but it definitely wasn't what she wanted to hear. She had to go on being uncertain. "They've been away on a mission. But they should be back soon. They're expected to return this week. We just need to wait a few days, that's all." Max tried to sound cautiously optimistic, but Gwen didn't like the sound of it. At the very least, that meant a few more days of waiting around doing nothing, still unsure whether or not Joel and Camille were even alive. And even if that group of plumbers did return, there's no guarantee that Joel and Camille were coming back with them. Let's head back to the rust bucket and try to get some sleep. It won't do us any good to worry about this anymore tonight, Max suggested. Wordlessly, Lucy nodded without looking at anything in particular. Gwen took her by the hand and led her back outside. Despite how exhausted Gwen was, she still had trouble getting back to sleep that night. But when she finally did, she ended up sleeping in later than everyone else. In the morning, she found Ben, Lucy, and Max already up and eating breakfast. "Morning, Gwen." Lucy greeted her cheerfully as she ate her cereal. Seeing that smile on that girl's face after last night was confusing. Gwen shot a questioning look to her grandfather, who shrugged and gave her a look back that said, "Your guess is as good as mine." Meanwhile, Ben was completely unaware of the events of last night, and didn't notice anything off about Lucy or how Gwen and Max were reacting to her. "We need to tell Ben before he says something stupid." Gwen knew Ben well enough to know he would never intentionally hurt someone's feelings, but that's never stopped him from doing it anyway. As she moved around the room grabbing her breakfast, Gwen made eye contact with Max again while Ben and Lucy were talking. She nodded her head in Ben's direction. Max looked back and forth between them. He didn't seem to get it. Gwen sighed. She nodded her head at Ben again, this time mouthing "Tell him." Then she nodded her head at Lucy. Max opened his mouth in a silent "oh" as he finally got what she was trying to tell him. Satisfied that she had gotten the message across, Gwen sat down at the table next to Lucy. After a moment, Max cleared his throat and spoke to Ben. "Say, Ben, why don't you come with me into the base again this morning? There's something in there I want to try fixing, and I think one of your aliens might be able to help out." "Okay, Grandpa," Ben agreed. Even if it was just grunt work, he still loved any opportunity to use the Omnitrix. So, he scarfed down what remained of his breakfast, and the two of them left, leaving Gwen and Lucy alone at the table. So Lucy turned to Gwen. "What do you wanna do today?" She smiled brightly. It was like last night had never happened. I don't know." Gwen still wasn't quite sure what to make of the situation, but she figured if Lucy wasn't saying anything about the Camille situation, she shouldn't either. "Whatever you wanna do, I guess." "You wanna teach me some more karate?" Lucy suggested. "Yeah, sure. We can do that," Gwen agreed. "Eh?" Lucy cheered excitedly. "I'll go grab some pillows to make a punching bag. Or a pillow fort." "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get in that rocket of yours and get going," Ben demanded. Max had just finished explaining to him the events of last night and their current situation. "We can't do that," Max calmly insisted. "I already told you. The ship in the bay is in no condition to fly. We just need to be patient and stay here for a few days until we find out what's happening." "Fuck that," Ben said disgustedly. "That's our family out there. We're not just gonna sit here and do nothing." "That's exactly what we're going to do, young man," Max said sternly. "But we have nothing to worry about. My nephew has dealt with sludge puppies plenty of times before, and now that he has Camille with him, he should be more prepared than ever. Trust me. They'll be fine. If your ship won't work, maybe we can find another one. We'll call Tetrarchs. Or we'll find some other aliens. There's gotta be dozens of them nearby. At least one of them will have a working ship," Ben said. He wasn't about to give up that easily. Sitting by and doing nothing wasn't his style, especially if someone like Lucy needed him. "Ben, enough, Max said, putting his foot down. But from the look on Ben's face, he knew he had to at least meet him halfway on this if he wanted any hope of Ben listening to him. He sighed. 3 days. If we haven't heard back from them in 3 days, we'll find a working ship and go find them ourselves, Max said. He wasn't sure whether or not he'd be able to follow through on that. With how infamous he was amongst the aliens who've had contact with the plumbers, it usually wasn't safe for him to leave Earth. But he was confident the plumbers would get back to him with news before it came to that. Ben groaned and kicked the wall. Fine, he relented. Max nodded gratefully, and the two of them began walking back to the rust bucket. On the way, Ben had a moment to process what Max had told him. He was just as stunned as Gwen had been to learn how upset Lucy was. Even just this morning, she'd seemed so cheery and upbeat. He resolved to find some way to help her. Someone has to. The four of them spent the rest of the day pretending nothing was wrong. Lucy continued to act like her ordinary, energetic self, and the others figured the best thing they could do was play along. At one point, Ben managed to get Gwen alone in the rust bucket for a moment. He wanted to hear her side of what had happened while he was asleep the night before. She told him how she'd caught Lucy sneaking into the base and boarding the rocket, and how she wanted to fly off to go save Camille. Max didn't know about that part. Gwen went on to explain the rest of what happened, but Ben had heard the rest from Maximum. However, Gwen decided to leave out the part where she told Lucy about the time the Omnitrix almost self-destructed. "Why didn't you wake me up?" Ben asked. "What?" "I don't know, I didn't want to bother you," Gwen said. Besides, Lucy was really freaking out. I kind of wanted her to have a little privacy. I wasn't even going to wake up Grandpa, but we needed him to help us contact the plumbers. I could have done something. Ben said. "If I go upgrade, I can have that rocket fixed up in no time. We can take Lucy and go save Joel and Camille ourselves." Ben, no. Even if upgrade can make it work, there's no telling whether or not it'll keep working once the Omnitrix times out, Gwen said, thinking practically. "We need to listen to Grandpa on this." She saw the look on Ben's face. "I know you hate not being able to help. I wish we could do more than just sit around, too. But we can't." Ben wanted to argue that more, but they were interrupted by Lucy bursting through the door. "Hey, guys. What's up?" Ben and Gwen looked at each other and said nothing. "Not much." "Hey, wanna play some sumo slammers?" Ben asked. "Okay." Lucy agreed. Ben was even less enthusiastic than Gwen was about pretending everything was okay, but he knew he had to keep his head down for now. "I'll figure something out. You'll see." After getting to know her a little better over the years, Ben and Gwen both thought they understood Lucy pretty well. However, Ben was confident he understood her far better than Gwen did. Lucy isn't like Gwen. She's like me. She's a rule breaker. Lucy wasn't pretending she was fine today in order to keep everyone else from worrying, she was doing it to fool everyone into taking their eyes off of her. Gwen may have stopped her from stealing the space shuttle last night, but why would she let that stop her from trying to do it again tonight? "That's what I'd do." So that night, Ben only pretended to go to sleep. And sure enough, in the middle of the night, he heard Lucy get out of her bed and sneak out the door. Ben waited a moment in case Gwen had woken up from the noise, but she didn't. Max didn't seem to have woken up either. With the coast clear, Ben hopped down from his bunk and followed Lucy. When he got outside, he'd already lost track of Lucy. But he knew exactly where she was going. He ran into the plumber base and made his way to the shuttle bay. He was actually really curious to see what the rocket looked like on the inside, even though he knew it would probably be really lame compared to Tetrox's ship. He boarded the rocket and climbed the ladder up to the bridge, and, just as he'd expected, there was Lucy. However, while he was expecting her to be trying to get the ship to work, she wasn't. Instead, she was curled up on the ground, with her face pressed into her knees. The sight of her briefly reminded him of Gwen, who cried much the same way. But he pushed that out of his head for now. What is she doing? Lucy. Ben let her know he was there. Lucy unknit her face. She didn't seem surprised to see him. There were tears in her eyes. Her irises were like a lava lamp, constantly morphing their shape and shifting their color, like she was having trouble keeping them steady. "Hi, Ben," she said, her voice extremely dull. She seemed to lose focus almost immediately. Gwen told me about, what's going on," Ben said, walking over and sitting down beside her. Lucy didn't say anything immediately. The two of them sat there in silence for a minute. The whole situation wasn't at all like Ben had planned. He thought she would still be trying to get the ship running, and he'd use upgrade and gray matter to help her. They could have been off this planet before Gwen and Max had a chance to stop them. But, here they were. "You and Gwen have been doing this for a while now, right?" Lucy asked. "Like, these summer trips? Fighting bad guys and stuff?" Ben tilted his head. He didn't really expect Lucy to be asking about him and Gwen, given the current situation. But he answered anyway. "Yeah, I guess so. I mean, this is our third summer. Do you ever worry about something happening to her?" Lucy asked. Ben looked worried, but she couldn't tell if he was going to answer or not. "Gwen told me about the time the Omnitrix almost blew you up," she said. Oh. Ben hadn't expected that either. More tears welled up in Lucy's eyes. "Camille could be dead for all I know." Ben thought for a moment before he spoke again. "When Gwen told you about the Omnitrix almost exploding, did she tell you how she almost died too?" Lucy shook her head. Ben thought she looked like she wanted him to continue, so he began to tell the story. "We knew the only way to stop the Omnitrix's self-destruct sequence was to find the guy who made it. But when we got to his old base, it was overrun with wild vines. One of them was about to eat me, so she dove in its path, and it ate her instead." Lucy's eyes opened wide. "For a while, I thought I'd lost her." Ben stuttered as he spoke and his eyes watered a little. He was suddenly finding this difficult to talk about. Lucy put her hand reassuringly on his back. "Why am I suddenly the one being consoled here?" "But I didn't. She made it out okay, and she came back and saved me," he concluded. "Gwen is a strong person. And I think Camille is that way too. I guess, sometimes, all you can really do is trust her." Ben wasn't sure why he was changing his mind about how to handle the situation now, and he thought what he was saying was rambly and unhelpful, but Lucy seemed to be considering his words deeply. "Camille's done so much for me. I used to think I was the only one who thought fighting with other planets was stupid. My parents treated me like a freak, like I was some kind of traitor to our kind." Lucy sniffed, holding back more tears. Ben didn't know what to say. "Camille was different. She's like me. Her parents don't approve of the way she cares about humans either. She brought me to Earth, where I could be away from the rest of our family. She gave me a better home. She understands me. She's been more of a mother to me than my real mother ever was." Lucy took a deep breath. "And you're right. She is strong. She'll come back for me. I know it." Ben put his arm around her and pulled her into him. She leaned against him and closed her eyes. "What is happening?" Ben was still having trouble processing all of this. He'd just learned more about Lucy in one day than he had in the past 2 years. "What else don't I know?" But he didn't want to dwell on that, and he definitely didn't want to start interrogating her. Instead, he let her rest comfortably against him until her tears dried up. "Do you want to go back to bed?" Ben whispered. Lucy's eyes were closed, so Ben thought she might have actually been asleep already, but she nodded. He stood up and helped her to her feet, then they climbed back down the ladder one after the other. As soon as Lucy got to the bottom, she stumbled. "Whoa, whoa," Ben said, grabbing hold of her to fix her balance. "I'm okay," she said, but her eyes were only half open. Ben realized how little sleep she'd gotten in the past 2 days. She must be exhausted. "Here." Ben turned his back to her. "Let me carry you." Lucy seemed to agree with the idea as she climbed onto his back, allowing Ben to give her a piggyback ride. He found her to be surprisingly light given how large her true form was. He didn't even need to transform into any of his aliens to carry her. As he walked through the plumber base, Ben soon heard the gentle sounds of Lucy's breathing. She was asleep for real now. Ben considered that a good thing, because he wasn't sure what else to say to her right now. When he got outside, he could see the rust bucket in the distance. The door opened, and Gwen stepped outside. He saw her looking around frantically. She must have just woken up and noticed he and Lucy were missing. As soon as she spotted them, she came running towards them. "Ben!" Gwen called out angrily as she approached. "Shush!" Ben called back to her. His hands were full carrying Lucy, so he couldn't gesture for her to be quiet. "Huh?" Gwen stopped in her tracks, confused. Then she saw Lucy. Her eyes opened wide. "What happened?" she asked, clearly panicking a little. She must have thought Lucy was unconscious. "Nothing," Ben whispered. "She's just sleeping." Gwen looked at him skeptically. "Did you use some kind of alien knockout gas on her?" "No, dweeb. She was just tired." Gwen looked relieved, probably just now realizing this meant Ben and Lucy hadn't left the planet on their own. "Well. Okay then. Let's get her back in bed, I guess." Ben and Gwen walked together down the path back to the rust bucket. Gwen held the door open for him. He went in first, creeping past a sleeping Max to get back to their bedroom. Gwen helped him carefully lay Lucy down onto the mattress on the ground beside their bunk bed, then she pulled the blankets over her. They watched her for a moment. She looked peaceful. After stressing out so much the last couple days, she must have needed the rest. "Let's talk outside," Gwen whispered. "I want to hear what happened." August, Year 2, Part 2. Gwen exhaled with a disappointed sigh. Ben had heard her do that a lot, but it wasn't usually herself she was disappointed in. "I can't believe how stupid I was," she said. Of course catching her once wouldn't be enough to stop her from trying. "Well, I guess we don't know if she was trying again, really," Ben offered. "Maybe she just went there to cry. She could have done that anywhere. She went to the rocket for a reason." I guess she just lost her nerve before you found her. Ben nodded, deciding to accept Gwen's explanation. The two of them sat together in the grass, a safe enough distance from the rust bucket that they could talk freely without having to worry about waking the others up. Ben had just finished explaining how he had followed Lucy back into the plumber base while Gwen was asleep. Gwen leaned forward and gripped her knees, eyes cast downwards guiltily. Relax. It's not your fault. And nothing happened anyway. So what's the problem? Ben said. Something could have happened, Gwen insisted. And, hell, it sounds like something would have happened if you hadn't changed your mind. Ben was going to argue, but she was right. Sorry. There was a pause before Gwen spoke again. Were you really going to leave me behind? She asked in a quiet voice. No, Ben said without hesitation. Well, I mean, I didn't think that far ahead, really. I didn't wake you up because I knew you'd stop us. But, I think if we had gotten the ship to work, I don't think I would have left without asking you to come with me. A small, tired smile appeared on Gwen's face. Okay. Ben thought that would be the end of the discussion, but he made no move to stand up. He was even more tired than Gwen appeared to be, but even though he needed sleep, he found it relaxing to just sit outside with her like this. Why didn't you try to fix the ship? Gwen asked. What? That was your plan, right? What made you change your mind? You're not usually the sit-and-wait kind of person. Ben furrowed his brow, thinking hard. I don't know. I just sorta did. Gwen was eyeing him curiously, clearly expecting more. Maybe seeing Lucy like that, kinda got me less fired up. And, well, what you said just started to make sense, I guess. Gwen chuckled lightly. It's about time you started listening to me. She was hoping for Ben to respond to that, but she noticed he looked disappointed. What's wrong? I think, 2 years ago, I definitely woulda done it, Ben said. I woulda went upgrade and flew that ship into space without a second thought. Gwen considered that for a moment. I guess you're just growing up. Is that what growing up is? Getting boring. Getting more normal. That's what my dad says, anyway. They both laughed. Ben had no trouble picturing Gwen's dad saying something like that. Ben stood up. Well, I don't like it. Like what? Being normal. That's not what summer's about. Next year, we're going to space again, he declared. Are you with me? Ben held out his left arm, reaching towards Gwen. For the briefest moment, the image of the Omnitrix beeping bright red and emitting the self-destruct alarm passed through Gwen's mind as she stared at his hand. Gwen. She looked up at him. Let's worry about keeping your head out of the clouds first, doofus, she said, standing up. Ben laughed. I'd like to see you try. A few days later, Ben, Gwen, and Lucy sat outside the comm room. Max was inside, talking with someone in plumber mission control. According to the plumbers, the group that Joel and Camille had been with were on their way back to their base. Control didn't have a head count yet, so Max was waiting for confirmation on whether or not Joel and Camille had made it back. The kids sat in uncomfortable silence. Lucy was staring blankly into space again, despite having managed to stay somewhat lively over the last couple days. Seated on either side of her, Ben and Gwen kept giving each other looks, trying to have a silent discussion about how to make Lucy feel better. Man, I still can't believe how run down this place is, Ben said, glancing around the dusty room filled with broken furniture. It looks less like a plumber base and more like it needs a plumber. Ben tried cracking a joke, hoping humor would ease the tension, but Lucy didn't seem to hear him. Won't be long until school starts up again, Gwen said. 7th grade should be fun. That's when the classes get more specialized at my school. Gwen tried to start a discussion about school, hoping it would serve as a distraction, but Lucy didn't respond to her either. Ben and Gwen went back to communicating silently. Then Max came back into the room. The sound of the door opening made Gwen's heart stop for an instant. She hadn't realized it before, but she was prepared for the worst. However, the look on her grandfather's face told her otherwise. He was smiling. Joel and Camille are fine, he informed Lucy, cutting right to the chase. Lucy's face lit up. She smiled, breathed a massive sigh of relief, and her eyes even teared up a bit. You can come in and talk to them now if you'd like, Max said. Lucy stood up and bolted past Max into the comm room. The others followed her inside, but stayed near the entrance. Lucy grabbed the microphone on top of the comm station. Camille. Joel. She hurriedly spoke into the mic. After a short delay, the voice of Camille came out of the speakers. Yes, Lucy. It's us. We're all right, followed the voice of Joel. Lucy breathed another sigh of relief, choking back tears of joy. It's so good to hear from you, she said. We're so sorry we haven't been able to contact you more until now, Camille said. The mission didn't go as planned. We would have called you again sooner, but... Camille, it's okay. Lucy interrupted her. I'm just glad you're back. Lucy started sniffling. Gwen could tell she was getting emotional, and figured they should give her some privacy. She signaled to Ben and Max, and the three of them left the room, shutting the door behind them. 20 minutes later, Lucy opened the door. The first thing she did was charge into Max and jump into him, throwing her arms around him in a big hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. She repeated rapidly. Then she hugged Gwen, and finally Ben, all while continuing to thank the three of them profusely. No need to thank us, Max said. We didn't do anything, after all. Oh yes you did. Lucy insisted. And I'm gonna make it up to you guys big time, I promise. What did Joel and Camille say? Ben asked, curious. Gwen shot him a nervous look, but said nothing. They're coming home. Lucy jumped for joy as she said that. They're leaving in a few days, and the trip's gonna be another day or two, but they'll be back before the end of the summer. Oh, I can't wait to tell them all about the bad guys we fought this summer. Camille's gonna be so proud of me. That's great, Lucy. I'm really glad they're okay, Gwen said. I know. Lucy started skipping in circles around the three of them. This is so great. Come on, guys. Let's get out of this place and go do something fun. Without waiting for a response, Lucy skipped out of the room. 1 week later. Toss him over here, Ben. Lucy shouted. She was in her true Lenopen form, a large, purple, muddy monstrosity. Ben, as 4 arms, picked up one of the weird, 6-legged, alien dog things they were fighting and tossed it across the street to Lucy. With a gooey tentacle, she smacked it out of the air, spiking it into the pavement. Heads up, Ben. Gwen shouted, soaring overhead on a disc of blue magic. 2 more aliens leapt at Ben from behind. Gwen shot off a couple of energy blasts, knocking one of them out of the air. The other landed on Ben's back. He grabbed it, flipped it over him, and slammed it into the ground. Yeah. Take that, you alien. Ah, damn it, I had something for this, Ben said, screwing up his one-liner. Gwen flew down and stepped off her magic disc next to Ben just before the Omnitrix timed out. Lucy slinked across the street and shrank down, shape-shifting into her standard human form. Is that all of them? Lucy asked, looking around at the defeated aliens scattered around them. I think so, Gwen answered. Yes. Lucy leapt into the air. All right, let's get back to the rust bucket. Come on, let's go. She took off running. Ben and Gwen shared a look, then followed her. They knew she was excited today because they were on their way to meet with Joel and Camille, who had returned to Earth the day before. Stumbling across those aliens was a small setback, but they couldn't have let them roam free. Ben was glad to fight more aliens, especially with the summer coming to an end soon. Even though he understood why, it still seemed weird that Lucy was so excited for the summer to end. He never looked forward to that. When they got back to the rust bucket, Max took them back on the road to Lucy's house. Ben sat up front and told him about the fight. Max was very interested in what those aliens were and what they were doing here, but he had promised Lucy he'd take her home as soon as possible, so he didn't have time to investigate further. Meanwhile, Gwen went into the bedroom in the back of the rust bucket to pack the rest of her things. Lucy followed her inside and shut the door. What's up? Gwen asked, wondering why Lucy thought they needed privacy. Lucy took the time to choose her words carefully, which Gwen was not used to seeing. I wanted to talk to you. Before I get home, I mean, she said. Oh. Okay. Gwen nodded. She wasn't sure where Lucy was going with this, but given recent events, she was prepared for something serious. Lucy took a deep breath. First of all, I wanna thank you. For everything. You let me stay with you in Bellwood, you invited me on this trip, and you were so helpful when I had that little freak out last week. You've been really cool about everything. So, thank you. Gwen smiled. Hey, it was no big deal. She was a little uncomfortable being given so much praise, especially since she didn't feel like she'd done anything. Lucy grinned shyly. I also wanna ask you something. About Ben. Gwen raised her eyebrows, then gave Lucy a sympathetic look. She just had a really stressful experience. Is now the time to be worrying about us? However, she nodded for Lucy to continue. How do you think he feels about you? Lucy asked, getting right to the point now. Gwen blinked. This wasn't exactly how Lucy usually phrased these kinds of questions. Well, I'm his best friend, Gwen said, thinking that should be enough to get the point across. Lucy didn't look satisfied. I talked with him a bit about what happened at the end of your first summer together, she said. Gwen opened her eyes wide in surprise. She didn't expect that topic to come up again so soon. What about it? She asked, a bit nervous now. About how you almost got eaten by a Florauna. Lucy spoke a little more delicately, expecting this to be a touchy subject for Gwen. He was really worried about you, you know. He could barely keep himself from crying when he talked about it. Gwen scoffed, chuckling a little. Oh, come on. Ben's not that emotional. Lucy pursed her lips, then continued. All I'm trying to say is, you're really important to him. Probably much more than you think. And I know he's important to you, too. You guys really have something special. Gwen stared at Lucy for a moment. She wasn't quite sure what Lucy was getting at, but she had an idea, and it was weirding her out. Well, yeah. We're best friends, she repeated, again expecting that to explain everything. Lucy smiled sympathetically, as if Gwen had missed the point entirely. She sighed. I'm really gonna miss you guys, she said, seemingly changing the subject. We'll miss you too, Gwen told her. The two of them stepped in closer and hugged. Lucy gave Gwen a kiss on the cheek, which made Gwen laugh and pull back. Come on, let's go see what Ben's up to. The rest of the drive was spent in relatively high spirits. The kids sat around the rust bucket, talking, joking around, and playing video games together while Max drove. Lucy was still as excited as ever, and she couldn't sit still for very long. Are we almost there? Lucy asked Maximum. She'd been asking him pretty much every 10 minutes since they started the drive, but Max continued to patiently answer her every time. Almost there, sweetheart. This time, they were actually almost there. We've got just a couple miles to go. Shouldn't be more than a few minutes. Lucy squealed in excitement, making Ben and Gwen flinch in surprise. I can't wait. I wanna tell them all about this summer. I wonder if we fought more aliens than they did. You think they've ever seen those weird things we saw in that last city? Ben and Gwen looked at each other as Lucy went on and on. They chuckled a little. Lucy's hyperactivity was something they'd grown accustomed to, and they were gonna miss it when she was gone. As Max predicted, they were pulling up in front of Joel and Camille's house within 10 minutes. As soon as her neighborhood was in sight, she ran to the door of the rust bucket and hopped up and down in front of it until the vehicle came to a stop. As soon as it did, she threw the door open and sprinted to the house. Camille. Camille. Joel. It's me, open up. Lucy shouted excitedly, rapidly banging on the front door. Ben, Gwen, and Max had barely stepped out of the rust bucket when Joel and Camille answered the door. They watched as Lucy hugged them, wrapping her arms around them both. Even though she was smiling still, the others could see she had started crying, overwhelmed at seeing her surrogate parents again. They gave them a minute before joining them. Uncle Max. Good to see you again, Joel greeted Max as he came inside the house. Same to you, Joel. Max warmly returned his nephew's greeting, extending an arm to shake his hand. Ah, Ben and Gwen. Welcome, come on in. Joel continued to greet his guests as they walked in behind their grandfather. Camille still had her arm wrapped tightly around Camille's waist. Hello, everyone, Camille said, brushing Lucy's hair as she spoke. Thank you all so much for taking care of Lucy while we were away, she told them. We owe you so much. Not at all, we were happy to have her, Max said. You guys wanna stay for dinner? We made plenty, Joel offered. Lucy gasped, smiling. Can you? Can we? Ben and Gwen asked in unison, turning to face Maximum. They never passed up an opportunity to avoid their grandfather's cooking. Sure, we'd be glad to, Max answered. As they moved into the dining room, Gwen had a faint worry that Camille may have made some kind of weird alien food that would be almost as bad as Max's cooking. Luckily, her fears were unfounded, as the table was set up with several servings of ordinary human food. Apparently they'd prepared a little feast to celebrate being reunited with Lucy, who happened to love human food. It was like Thanksgiving. Dinner didn't carry with it any of the usual awkwardness that most Tennyson family dinners tended to suffer from. A lot of that was because of Lucy, who was always the light of the party. She excitedly told Joel and Camille about all the adventures she'd been on with Ben and Gwen that summer, and how awesome it was to live with Gwen. Ben took the opportunity to ask Joel what it was like being a plumber. Max didn't talk about it too much, and he was mostly retired now, so he was interested to hear what it was like nowadays. Gwen didn't talk much. She was too busy thinking about everything that had happened. She was relieved everything had turned out all right, but she knew from experience that incidents like this came with lasting effects. She found it hard to tell what Lucy was thinking, however. I can't even begin to read her anymore, can I? After dinner, Max suggested Ben go help Lucy bring her stuff out of the rust bucket and into the house while the rest of them helped with the dishes. As soon as Ben agreed, Lucy grabbed him by the arm and pulled him to his feet, taking him along as she skipped out of the room. Lucy had considerably more stuff in the rust bucket than Ben and Gwen did. Whereas they had only packed for a summer trip, she had everything she'd brought with her to Gwen's house when it was decided she would be staying there. It was going to take a few trips to bring everything inside. Ben couldn't tell which stuff was Gwen's and which stuff was Lucy's, so he let Lucy hand him what she wanted him to carry. "What's in this one?" Ben asked as Lucy handed him a cardboard box. "Just some comic books," Lucy said, handing him a bag. "Comic books? What year is it?" Ben thought comic books were a little outdated, but since Lucy based her human appearance mostly on comic book superheroines, he figured she must be a big enough fan to collect them anyway. Lucy placed a small suitcase on top of the box Ben was carrying. "What's in this one?" he asked again. Lucy gave him a devilish smirk. "My underwear." "You?" Ben shuddered, dropping everything he was carrying. Lucy began cracking up. "Hey, so not cool," Ben said. "Relax, I was only joking," Lucy said. She unzipped another bag and picked it up. "This is the one with my underwear in it." She haphazardly tossed the bag to Ben. Ben reflexively tried to catch it before he had time to process what was happening, but its contents spilled out all over him. He started to freak out until he realized the bag was full of nothing but t-shirts. He froze, his face completely red. "Oh. Psych." Lucy resumed her cackling laughter. Ben tossed Lucy's clothes down onto the floor and crossed his arms, glaring at her. It took almost a full minute for Lucy to calm down enough to talk again. "Geez, I can't decide who's more fun to tease, you or Gwen," she said in between giggles. She could tell Ben was less than amused, however. All right, I'm sorry, really. That was the last time, I swear." "No big deal," Ben said, trying not to sound as humiliated as he felt to be tricked like that. "So? I'll pick up my shirts," Lucy said. Ben nodded and grabbed the box of comics and the suitcase, then stood off to the side as Lucy picked up her clothing and put them back in her bag. Once Lucy finished picking up her clothes, the two of them got back to moving her stuff into the house. After a few trips, they managed to bring everything inside. "Where should I put this?" Ben asked, holding the last of Lucy's bags. They were upstairs in Lucy's room, where her other things were currently strewn about her entire floor. "Just toss it over there," Lucy pointed to a pile of other bags. Ben did as she said. "We!" Lucy shouted, jumping face down onto her bed. She bounced and flipped over. "Ah!" She closed her eyes as she stretched, getting comfortable. She'd missed her bed. She lied there for a moment before sitting up. "Thanks, Ben," she said. "No sweat. I don't just mean for helping me carry my stuff," Lucy said, standing up. She had already said her thanks to Gwen earlier today, and she'd been looking for an opportunity to talk with Ben alone so she could thank him too. I really had a lot of fun hanging out with you and Gwen this year. Ben smiled. And you really helped me out. A lot. Ben scratched the back of his neck uncomfortably. After being teased and joking around with her so much, he was caught off guard by her sudden gratitude. Well, you're welcome. Always glad to help. Like Gwen, he felt he hadn't done anything, but he had no problem taking the credit. Lucy took a few steps closer to him. Ben took a step back, but she just took another step forward. Lucy smiled, once again enjoying his obvious discomfort. She raised her left hand and placed it on his right cheek. Ben froze, staring into her eyes. He started having flashbacks to last Christmas. Fuck. Is she? Lucy met his gaze and continued to stand there for a moment with her hand on his cheek. Without another word, she gave him a lingering kiss on the other cheek. Ben didn't react, other than to turn red in the face again. Lucy pulled back. Ben's eyes were even wider, shocked by her actions. Lucy smiled at him, but it wasn't the devious, teasing smile he expected. Her smile was warm and genuine. Gwen's gonna be lucky to have you, she told him. Ben furrowed his brow. Doesn't she have me now? Seeing the confusion on his face, Lucy giggled and shook her head at his cluelessness. Come on, she said, turning and skipping to her door. Let's go back downstairs with everyone else. The Tennysons spent the rest of the evening at Lucy's house. Since it was too late to start driving again, Ben, Gwen, and Max spent the night in the rust bucket. In the morning, they all went back inside and had breakfast with Lucy's family. They hung around for another few hours until Max decided it was time for him, Ben, and Gwen to get going. He still had several stops planned for the final week of summer, and he also thought Lucy would appreciate the chance to have some time alone with her family after being away from them for so long. As everyone gathered around to say their goodbyes, Joel and Camille once again thanked Max and the kids for taking care of Lucy while they were away, and Lucy gave Max a big hug. Afterwards, Lucy stood before Ben and Gwen. Even after getting a chance to talk to each of them in private yesterday, she still looked like she had a lot left to say. But before saying anything, she pulled them both into a group hug. I love you guys so much, she said. Then she started rapidly kissing them on the cheek, switching back and forth between the two of them. Whoa, whoa. Ha ha, okay, geez. Ben and Gwen pushed their way out of Lucy's hug. Max, Joel, and Camille laughed at the whole exchange. Lucy stood back and smiled at them. Seriously though, guys. I'm gonna miss you. You gotta text me or Skype me, like, all the time. Okay. Sure, we'll definitely keep in touch, Gwen agreed. And come back to Bellwood whenever you can. That place is crazy boring without you around, Ben said. Gwen elbowed him in the side and gave him an excuse me look, but she smiled good-naturedly. Deal. Lucy agreed. She studied them for a moment. Ben and Gwen could tell she was giving a lot of thought to something, but all she said was good luck. You too, Ben said, assuming she meant with fighting aliens or something. All right, kids. Let's hit the road, Max said. Everyone gave one last goodbye, and they were out the door. Gwen flinched a little when she felt her leg bump into Ben's. She suddenly became aware of how close she and him were sitting. She didn't even know how they'd ended up like this. When they'd first boarded the rust bucket that day, they'd initially sat down on opposite sides of the table. Gwen had gone over to Ben's side to see what game he was playing, and the idea to go back to her side had just never occurred to her. Being this close to Ben again felt strange. It's been a while since we've sat like this. While Lucy was around and it wasn't just the two of them, there was always a decent bubble of personal space for each of them, even if that bubble was constantly invaded by Lucy. But now, with Lucy gone, any boundary between them just seemed to disappear almost immediately. Gwen smiled. I missed this. She loved Lucy, especially after getting to know her so much more these past months, but now it was back to her and Ben. Just me and my best friend. She knew it would be different after Lucy left, but she hadn't realized just how much she missed this sort of thing until she had it again. Ben was playing a game on his handheld console. Gwen knew the game. She didn't have it herself, but he'd let her and Lucy play it, and she was pretty good at it. But right now, Gwen was reading Characasta's spellbook. This summer had once again given her many opportunities to practice her spellcraft, but the book was so dense that there was always more to learn. She shifted her position again and leaned back to get more comfortable as she read about a new defensive spell. Meanwhile, Ben continued tapping away at his game. The game's sound effects and the sound of Ben rapidly pushing the buttons rang in Gwen's ear. She could tell exactly what part he was trying to beat. She thought it was weird that it was loud enough for her to hear this clearly. Breaking her focus from her spellbook, she took stock of her situation. She was laying on Ben. He had his back propped up against the wall of the rust bucket. She was laying on his chest. His left arm was wrapped around her, which meant he had to hold his game off to the side of her head. She also realized she was holding her book with one hand, while the other hand gently gripped the arm wrapped around her. When the heck did this happen? She'd realized earlier how close they were sitting, but after shifting positions a few times to get more comfortable, she'd somehow managed to end up like this. Gwen blushed nervously when she realized their grandfather could look back and see them like this at any time. Is this weird? Would he think this is weird? Knowing Max, he'd probably just say, well, isn't that cute? But no matter how he reacted, Gwen would die of embarrassment if anyone saw her and Ben at that moment. Maybe that's why we never did this with Lucy around. It wasn't something she'd consciously avoided, and she doubted Ben had either, but she wondered if they both subconsciously knew this was weird. Somehow they both knew to hide it from everyone else, even their grandfather and Lucy. Something about that made it feel wrong. But she didn't move. Instead, she tightened her grip on Ben's arm a little. He unconsciously responded by hugging her a bit tighter. It made her feel safe or something, and before long, her initial awkwardness wore off. She went back to reading her book, trying not to worry about their grandfather. Oh, damn it. Gwen recognized the game over music coming from Ben's game. What's wrong? Having a little trouble? Gwen smirked, even though she was facing away from him. This level is impossible, Ben insisted, already starting again. Pfft, give it here. Gwen put her book down and reached back, yanking the game out of Ben's hands. He didn't protest. As she took over and started playing for him, he wrapped his other arm around her, his arms crossing and pulling her into him. Gwen ignored how flushed her face felt and tried to focus on the game, but it was difficult. Gwen was good at this game, but Ben wasn't kidding. This level was difficult. She got pretty far for her first run, but eventually she mistimed a jump. Shoot! She shouted. Ben laughed. Not so easy after all, ha, dweeb. Whatever, doofus. Gwen held the game over her head and dangled it from her hand like she was about to drop it. "Hey, watch it." Ben snatched his game back before it fell. Now without Ben's arms wrapped around her, she felt exposed, like she'd woken up in the middle of the night and her blanket had been pulled off of her. She pushed herself backwards, pressing into him a bit more. He seemed to get the message, and once again wrapped an arm around her as he played his game. Gwen closed her eyes and smiled. She felt so relaxed, she thought she might fall asleep like this. Is this weird? She asked herself that same question again. The way they were sitting, the way she really seemed to enjoy the way Ben was holding her, and the way he seemed to know what she wanted him to do without her having to say it. She didn't think this was something cousins did, or even something best friends did. She considered sitting up and moving away from him. Ben probably doesn't even notice. Gwen rationalized that he didn't share her thoughts. He was probably too caught up in his game to wonder about whether or not they are doing anything weird. "Hey, kids," Max called from up front. Immediately, Ben and Gwen scrambled to untangle themselves and sit upright. "We're almost there. You ready?" Max asked. Yeah. Yeah, cool." Ben and Gwen spoke at the same time. Gwen cleared her throat. Her heart was beating pretty fast. Her earlier fears of being seen by her grandfather resurfaced. She pulled her book out and placed it in front of her on the table. Max didn't seem to have noticed anything, and if he did, he didn't seem to care. But Gwen was still nervous. She glanced to her side. Sitting next to her, Ben was intensely focused on his game. His face looked as red as hers felt. Guess he was thinking the same thing after all. She tried to go back to reading her book, but she couldn't focus. "Are we too close now?" She didn't really know what that might mean. There were all sorts of boundaries they didn't cross before they officially became friends. Now that they'd crossed those, there must be 100 new ones to worry about, but Gwen had no idea what they were. Gwen glanced at Ben again. Just from looking at him, she felt her heart beat faster, so she quickly turned back to her book. "We're best friends." She felt the need to remind herself of that. For the next 10 minutes, Gwen managed to focus on reading her book, but Ben was always in the back of her mind. When she eventually turned to look at him again, she saw that any awkwardness he'd been experiencing earlier seemed to be gone. He was playing his game like nothing was wrong. Gwen said under her breath. She turned back to her book. "Maybe I'm overthinking this. And that's the ending of this part, everyone. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel, and also tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.